Chapter 211, Heading Towards the West. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Jin Xiaohai's complexion became ugly. Moning and others stopped laughing. But, their eyes still revealed an enjoyable look, as if it was a nice play. Shi Mu's mood became funny due to Cai's behavior. However, he had brought this Cai with him. So, he didn't have any other choice but to cup his hands towards Jin Xiaochai. He then spoke in an attempt to resolve the matter, "Master Jin, please calm down. Your position is very honorable. So, I presume that you wouldn't fuss over this useless parrot." "Oh, you're right. An elder's position is extremely honorable. But, you also heard the words it just spoke, right?" Jin Xiaochai rolled her eyes. She then put down the whip from her hand, and said with a smile. Shi Mu didn't reply. But, a noisy voice resounded, "Shi Tou, you can't listen to this woman. She wants to kill your Cai for sure. Cai is very obedient. And, Cai's flesh smells very bad. Its taste isn't good either." The parrot lifted one of its wings, and put it in front of one of its eye. The traces of evil look had disappeared from its eyes as it looked towards Jin Xiaochai. It then argued in a low voice. Shi Mu became speechless. He could see that Jin Xiaohai's eyes were blazing with fury. It seemed that she was about to explode. Therefore, Shi Mu said in a stern voice before she could say anything, "Cai, Master Jin is an elder master of my sect. Her cultivation is much higher than that of mine. So, I can't do anything if she wants to kill you and stew you in a soup. Master Jin is superior. Cai was just joking with you. You mustn't take offense. You're so pretty and intelligent. Moreover, you're such a brilliant spirit magician. How are you so fond of this Shi Tou?" A frightened look appeared in the parrot's eyes as it heard this. It then hurriedly spoke these words to please Jin Zaichai. "You're being troublesome again. You don't need to bother Master Jin. She has told you in advance that she would pull your feathers." Shi Mu stared at Cai. And, this made Cai swallow the next word. The rest of the three people wanted to laugh. But, how could they commit an offense in front of the two of them? So, they didn't laugh, and merely lowered their heads. However, their faces became red because of holding back their laughter. "Let it be. This parrot is very tactful. I'm a person of great moral stature. So, I'll forget the offences committed by one of low moral stature. I forgive you. Shi Mu, you come over. I want to talk to you about something." Jin Xiaochai titled the corner of her mouth as she heard Cai's flattering words. She seemed to be enjoying this. She then collected her whip, and addressed Shi Mu. After that, she turned over, and sat on her dark red horse. She turned around her horse, and started to advance out of the valley. Shi Mu also turned around, and sat on his black wildebeest. Then, he moved his horse, and started to ride behind Jin Xiaochai. Moning and the other two people also got on their horses, and started to follow after them. Shi Mu and Jin Xiaochai eventually started to move side by side on their horses. "Shi Mu, you went to the holy mountain as a bodyguard of Princess Huo Wu's. So, you must have become quite familiar with the wasteland of the barbarian race, right?" Jin Xiaochai asked. "I had stayed in the wasteland for several months. But, to say that I'm familiar with that place is out of question. I can only say that I have a little understanding of it," Shi Mu replied. "We're going to the heavenly demon sect this time. We might have to go through the sea race. But, the coastal situation is extremely intense at the moment. So, we have no other choice but to take another route. Therefore, we might try to pass through the wasteland of barbarian race. The route of this journey is dependent upon you to decide and arrange," Jin Xiaochai said. "Yes." Shi Mu's complexion became dignified. Jin Xiaochai nodded. She then pulled the reins of her horse. And, she went speeding towards the mouth of the valley on her dark red horse. Shi Mu and the other 3 people increased the speed of their horses as they saw this. They then started to follow the dark red horse. The fog from the mountain valley had scattered by this time. The sun was rising from the east. The glaring sunshine was pouring down and sprinkling everywhere. Everything in the valley was shining and glittering. The troop consisted of 5 people including Shi Mu. And, they forged ahead towards the rising sun. Their horses had soon left the valley. They then started to advance towards the west. And, their figures soon transformed into 4 black dots. 10 days later, the group arrived at the frontier of the border of the Yan nation. They had come very far by now. A place between 2 small mountains could be seen in front of them. There was also a medium-sized barrack of the barbarian race in front of them. A flag had been raised on a very long pole beside the barrack. The flag was fluttering in the wind. It had an eye-catching red scorpion on it. This barrack had blocked the entrance of the mountain. It seemed to be a checkpoint. The people of both the races were to be questioned if they needed to pass through the border here. Inside the tent of the barbarian barracks leader, a barbarian man of about 30 years of age sat upright on the owner's seat. He had a yellowish complexion. There was a mark of a blazing and fierce scorpion on his left arm. He looked towards the group standing in front of him with an expressionless face. The aura on his body was strong. His cultivation seemed to be at the middle level of the Xian Tian realm. Your Excellency is a powerhouse of your sect. The skills of your subordinates don't seem to be feeble either. May I ask why you wish to enter the wasteland? The yellow-skinned man sized Jin Xiaochai up and down. He then asked without any politeness. Lord Du Tong, we've to go to the Blue Unicorn tribe in order to purchase a herbal medicine as per the orders of the sect. It's a safety issue of the wasteland. I think you know about it. Jin Xiaohai's complexion didn't change as she said. The Blue Unicorn tribe was a small tribe of peaceful barbarians, and was at a great distance from their present location. It was located beside the Iron Mountain in the depth of the wasteland. It was quite famous as it had rare herbal medicines in abundance. There were many vicious barbarian tribes on the way to this tribe. Jin Xiaochai and Shi Mu used this as an excuse as they had discussed this in advance. Pay 100,000 silvers. Then, you can go. The yellow-skinned man thought for a while. He then nodded and said. Thank you very much, Lord Tong, Jin Xiaochai replied with a smile. She then moved her hand, and took out several silver notes. She then handed them over to the yellow-skinned man. The yellow-skinned man accepted them without any trace of politeness. Then, Jin Xiaochai and the others bid them farewell, and left. The tent soon became quiet. The yellow-skinned man opened the covering veil of the tent, and looked towards the silhouettes of Shi Mu and other people as they faded away into the distance. His eyes exposed a strange look. After 2 days, it was night. Shi Mu sat cross-legged in a tent. He was meditating. It seemed as if he wasn't breathing. The parrot Cai was also in an intoxicated sleep nearby him. Suddenly, Shi Mu opened his eyes. He then moved his right hand, and a black light flashed. Then, the black blade appeared in his hand. Chi! A strange sound of tearing of a cloth echoed. Then, a young calf-sized shadow entered from the direction of the sound. After that, a gale of fishy smell rushed towards Shi Mu. Shi Mu got up from the ground. The black blade light rose up in his hand at the same time. Then, a heavy rain of blood got sprinkled around. Ah! An odd, deep and loud sound was heard. The invading shadow had been beheaded by the black blade. Shi Mu took a closer look. The shadow turned out to be a creature with the head of a long lizard, the body of a wolf, and the tail of a poisonous scorpion. It was a strange and vicious beast. Scorpion tail beast. Shi Mu's pupils shrank. He vaguely remembered that it was a kind of a vicious beast that lived in flocks. Its cultivation wasn't too high. But, its tail contained dangerous poison which was hard to deal with. Quack! Quack! What kind of a strange thing is this? It's too dangerous. The parrot had been sent into panic. So much so that it had lost its head in fear. So, it shouted in an odd manner. It then flapped its wings, and flew out from the place from where the tent had been torn. Suddenly, a few strange sounds of giggling were heard. Then, 3 shadows rushed from 3 different directions at a very fast speed. Shi Mu shook his right arm. 3 black blade chi went out while tearing the air. They flashed, and penetrated the bodies of the shadows. The 3 shadows were hit in midair. They then started to issue mournful beast howls. Shi Mu's figure flashed, and appeared out of the tent. Then, he swept his vision. Jin Xiaochai, Mo Ning, and others were already outside their tents. They were fighting together against the shadows with the weapons in their hands. These scorpion tail beasts could be seen everywhere in the camp. They were widely scattered in large numbers in the west. And, they were rushing towards this place. In fact, they were more than 1,000 in number. Jin Xiaohai's body was shrouded by black lights that had been formed by the whip shadows. And, black lights of concentrated real qi were flying out from her long whip in a continuous manner. Suddenly, the flesh of a scorpion tail beast exploded by the whip. It was then reduced to a pulp of meat. Mo Ning was completely shrouded by layers of white drizzling clouds and mists. He was rapidly rushing towards the scorpion tail beasts without making any noise. Bai Shuixiu was holding a blue magic cane in her hand. Her entire body was covered in a layer of blue lights. She waved her lily-white hand. Then, 5 pikes of water light appeared out of nowhere. And, 2 scorpion tail beasts were nailed to the ground with a flash. Qianxiang was holding a black iron truncheon in his hands. 2 black lights were dancing around his body. The black light rushed across, and broke the muscles of a scorpion tail beast. Most of these scorpion tail beasts have the strength of only a Houtian initial level. But, their claws, teeth, and tails are highly toxic. Be careful. Don't run into them. A flame flashed on Shi Mu's blade. It then transformed into layers of clouds of fire, and shielded him. Shi Mu warned everyone at the same time. Everyone's heart trembled with fear as they heard Shi Mu's warning. Everyone, protect your horses quickly. Suddenly, Jin Xiaochai thought of something. She then rapidly swept towards the east side of the camp. She warned everyone at the same time. Shi Mu and others advanced towards the place where they had put their horses. Half an hour later, Shi Mu and the others were on the eastern side of their camp in order to protect their horses. 500 or 600 dead bodies of the scorpion tail beasts were lying upside down in the surroundings. The area was flowing with a river of blood. The remaining 300 or 400 scorpion tail beasts finally exposed fear in their eyes. Chi! Chi! They then turned around, and started to escape in all directions. Quack! Quack! The parrot came flying out of somewhere. It circled around Shi Mu's head. Then, it flew towards a place in the west. Shi Mu twitched the corner of his eye. He then rushed like a great arrow, and started to follow after the parrot. Jin Xiaochai and others stared blankly. After that, they started to follow after Shi Mu. After a quarter of an hour, there was a sloping place far from their camps in the west direction. A barbarian camp was set up several dozen feet away from the sloping place. A bonfire was burning in that place. The yellow-skinned man of the barbarian race who they had met on the checkpoint 2 days ago was sitting near the bonfire with a gloomy face. He was listening to the report of a totem warrior of the barbarian race. 20 or more barbarian totem warriors stood beside him. A giant 20 feet long scorpion tail beast lay prone beside the body of the man. It was emitting a vigorous and imposing aura of Houtian consummate stage. Who? Suddenly, the yellow-skinned barbarian stood up. He turned his head, and looked outside the camp. He then shouted, "Lord Du Tong, you've commanded these vicious beasts to attack us. Can it be that you want to provoke a war between the 2 races?" Jin Xiaochai held her whip in her hand. She walked in with a cold and gloomy look on her face. Shi Mu and the other 3 people also held their weapons. They came over with a murderous look on their faces. Then, they stood beside Jin Xiaochai in a row. "Oh, it was you people? It's just a coincidence. The wasteland of our barbarian race is never tranquil at nights. It's quite common that vicious beasts roam around." A light flashed in the eyes of the yellow-skinned man. He then said with a smile. He hadn't yet finished speaking when an ear-piercing and sky-breaking bang sound was heard. Jin Xiaochai swung the whip in her hand. Then, a whip shadow as thick as a thigh appeared out of nowhere. It then went coiling towards the yellow-skinned barbarian like a python. Chapter 212, Changing Route. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. The trace of an ominous grin flashed through the yellow-skinned man's eyes. Then, the poisonous scorpion totem that was on his left arm lit up brightly, and his entire left arm began to elongate at an astonishing speed. It quickly transformed into a 10 feet long red scorpion tail. After that, his right arm transformed into a huge pincer of a scorpion, and his entire body became covered with a layer of bright red shell. In fact, it looked like a large palm leaf fan. He gathered his right arm together. After that, the scorpion's pincer dashed in midair, and clamped in the void. Then, a fiery red airwave emerged, and darted out from within. It then received the black whip shadow. Bang! A loud rumbling sound was heard. The red and the black light erupted with a loud sound as they came in contact with each other. This triggered an intense wave of real qi, which then began to proliferate in all directions. After that, a burst of qi sound was heard from the light ball. Then, a beam of red light darted out from it. It was the yellow-skinned man's left hand that had taken the form of a scorpion's tail. It got extended, and arrived on top of Jin Xiaohai's head. Then, it spun around her head in order to tie her up in a ruthless manner. Jin Xiaochai saw this action, but didn't seem to care about it. She neither tried to evade nor hide from the attack. Instead, she flicked her wrist, and her black whip transformed into a dozen or more whip shadows. Then, they shot towards the yellow-skinned man to bind him. The bright red scorpion tail issued a whistling sound as it wrapped itself around Jin Xiaohai's body. However, a layer of golden light emerged, and began to flow on the surface of her body. Consequently, the scorpion tail ended up empty-handed. He didn't notice when it had deviated from the target by a slight margin. The yellow-skinned man was startled by this. Then, he saw that the whip shadow had arrived extremely close to him. So, he had no other choice but to raise his right arm, the scorpion pincer, in order to resist the attack. A battle between the 20 Houtian totem warriors and Shi Mu and his companions had also begun. The cultivation of these totem warriors was extremely strong. Majority of them seemed to be either at the middle stage or advanced stage of Houtian realm. Moreover, they all had stimulated their totem beasts by this time. Therefore, a layer of red shells had sprouted all over their bodies, and their arms had turned into a pair of gigantic pincers. They brandished their arms, and a red shadow began to flash in the air with a whistling sound. Shi Mu and his companions were the best A-grade disciples in the Black Demon sect. So, they stepped into the battle with a flagrant and fearless attitude even though they were outnumbered. Shi Mu hadn't taken out the short stick from his back. Instead, he stimulated his magic power. The black blade in his hand had transformed into 13 red blade lights. Then, they dashed towards 2 totem warriors, one on the left and the other on the right side, while carrying a surging cloud of fire. The blade lights started to circulate amid the fire. Then, they slashed the 2 men into a number of segments. But, the cuts that had been made looked smooth and flat. Not even a drop of blood had seeped out from their bodies. However, their bodies looked burnt. The red-colored shells were useless under the attack of the black blade. It seemed as if they existed in name only. Moning and the other 2 disciples were also having a confrontation with the enemy. Each of them had already killed 1 enemy. The black whip in Jin Xiaohai's hand transformed into a net of whip shadows. And, it trapped the yellow-skinned man inside it. However, the yellow-skinned man was reluctant to be outdone and admit defeat. His arms, a scorpion tail and a scorpion pincer, were suitable for both offensive and defensive attacks since they could be extended and shrunk in a convenient manner. The real qi surged within his body. Then, he looked at Jin Xiaochai in a manner that made it seem as if he could match her power. Then, something strange happened. A red shadow flashed behind Jin Xiaohai's back. It was the gigantic scorpion tail beast. It could be said that it had secretly pounced on her from behind. The green poisonous fog started to roll inside its mouth. It was on the verge of spurting it out towards her. Meanwhile, its poisonous tail sting hook had taken an extremely tricky angle. It rushed forward towards Jin Xiaochai with an intention to bundle her up on the spot. The facial expression of the yellow-skinned man looked ferocious. Suddenly, he accelerated his attacking speed. His intention was to startle Jin Xiaochai, and give her no time to escape. A long shadow was shot from the side like an electric current. And, it smashed into the head of the scorpion tail beast. And the tailed beast was struck to fly in the air as the overwhelming force landed on its head. A few red and white insides came out of its body while it was in the air. The scorpion tail beast's brain had burst open as its head had been struck by the shadow. It had died on the spot. The shadow was of the small meteoric hammer that Shi Mu had wrapped around his waist. Jin Xiaochai recovered from the alarm. And, her slender eyebrows plunged into a vertical frown. She then flicked her left hand. After that, she rushed forward with a streak of black light, and arrived in front of the yellow-skinned man. The yellow-skinned man's pupils shrank. A red-colored magic charm departed from his right hand's gigantic pincer. This charm had been drawn on an animal skin. A spurt of flame gushed out, and enveloped his entire body in a shield made of layers of red light. A black light exploded the next moment, and transformed into a 10 feet wide mass of black clouds. Then, a loud rumble was heard from the black cloud, and a finger-thick streak of white lightning plummeted down. It hacked at that shield made of red light, and left it shaking endlessly for a while. The yellow-skinned man's complexion changed. He was about to pull out another move. Suddenly, a series of explosive sounds were heard from the black cloud. After that, endless streaks of white lightning started to crash down in a continuous manner. Consequently, the red light shield underwent a fit of irregular flashes and flickers for an indefinite period of time. Then, it dimmed down. In fact, it seemed as if it was on the brink of a collapse. The yellow-skinned man revealed an alarmed look on his face. He then took out another magic charm that was drawn on a black animal hide. But, he didn't get enough time to activate it since the long black whip had already moved into action. It then pounded on the red light shield like a monster. Ping! A dull thumping sound was heard. The red light shield collapsed, and dispersed with a loud explosion. It was followed by a white lighting that hit the yellow-skinned man's head. The man's head burst into pieces like a watermelon. Then, his headless body staggered and tumbled backwards. In the meantime, Shi Mu and other people had been occupied in a fierce battle with Hotian totem warriors. Nearly 50% of those barbarian warriors had been slaughtered or severely injured by now. The remaining barbarians revealed a panic-stricken look on their faces when they saw that their leader had been killed. They looked as if they wanted to flee from the place. But, Jin Xiaochai and her companions couldn't let these people escape. Therefore, the remaining barbarians were slaughtered within a few minutes. Master Jin, we've slaughtered the barbarian warriors. Wouldn't a dispute between the human and the barbarian races be sparked if this news reached their ears? Bai Shuixiu stood by the campfire. She looked towards the corpses that were scattered around the camp, and asked. Moning and Qianxiang's faces revealed a disturbed look. Shi Mu was touching his chin, his face revealed a thoughtful expression. In fact, it seemed as if he was absorbed in a deep thought. They were the ones who initiated this battle. So, it's okay that we were very cruel and merciless. Let the Union's old fools have a headache in case our actions stir up any confusion. Anyways, we're here for a purpose. And we can continue on with this journey only if we take good care of ourselves. Jin Xiaochai snorted in a cold manner. She then said as if she hardly cared about this incident. We might have been under surveillance. I think we should change our route, Shi Mu's voice resounded. Moning and the others were startled as they heard Shi Mu's words. They then looked towards Shi Mu. Jin Xiaohai's beautiful gaze shifted towards Shi Mu. It seemed as if she was waiting for further explanation. These people hail from the Red Scorpion tribe. And, it's a viscous barbarian tribe if I'm not mistaken. This tribe isn't one of the 8 major tribes of the barbarian race. But, it's a branch of a major vicious tribe. The vicious barbarian tribes have always been hostile to our 7 big sects. But, they can't encroach into the territories of the 3 kingdoms since they're restricted by the peace treaty. But, we're in their territory right now. So, they may not abide by the peace treaty here, Shi Mu spoke up in a dignified tone. So, how should we proceed with our journey? Jin Xiaochai asked. We've been traveling in the northwestern direction for about half a month. We'll move towards the western direction along the mountain road once we reach the Black Rock Mountain. We'll have to take this detour since the Black Rock Mountain is adjacent to a peaceful barbarian tribe. And, the vicious barbarians are unlikely to come near their territory. So, this route will ensure our safety. Shi Mu pondered for a while. Then, he explained. So, it's decided. Let's go. Jin Xiaochai didn't want to give a second thought to this plan. Moning and the other 2 people also heard these words. They didn't know anything about the Black Rock Mountain. But, they couldn't raise any objections since Jin Xiaochai had already agreed to this proposal. Shi Mu's eyes moved. He had chosen this path because of 2 reasons. Firstly, he wanted to avoid all the troubles that might be caused by the vicious barbarians. After all, there was a not-so-good relationship between him and the 4 vicious barbarian tribes. In fact, the fierce snake tribe particularly harbored a strong resentment against him. Secondly, the Black Rock Mountain was a massive mountain that traversed the northwestern region of the barbarian wasteland in a horizontal manner. Moreover, volcanoes and other fire attributes entities existed in plentiful quantity in that area. Shi Mu could practice the sun-swallowing art every day at the time of sunrise. Moreover, he could practice the art of the flaming red ape and moon-swallowing art in the evening. The chi embryo within his body had gradually stabilized and saturated. So, he only needed one breakthrough to step into the Xian Tian realm. Therefore, he required a favorable place like the one he had seen in his sect. Their group started to hurry in the northwest direction. They didn't encounter any similarly dangerous attacks from the vicious barbarian, or from groups of ominous beast. They entered a huge black mountain range half a month later. The place looked pleasant to the eye at first. Everything was black at that place, whether it was a mountain rock or the land. But, this place portrayed the image of bleakness and barren land, like the other places of the barbarian wasteland. There was hardly any plant in the surroundings. Moreover, several traces of excavation could be seen in the mountain. Hee. Is this the so-called Black Rock Mountain Range? It surely lives up to its name. Qianxiang swept a glance in all directions. He then spoke up in a ridiculing manner. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and move. Jin Xiaochai looked at Qianxiang with glaring eyes as she said this. Qianxiang shrunk his plump neck as he heard her words. The other people didn't dare to speak anything. They hurried to enter the mountain range. There was a great fluctuation in the terrain of the barbarian wasteland. Therefore, these ordinary horses could play a very limited role at that place. Now, these people couldn't ride their horses. So, they had no other choice but to abandon their horses, and continue the journey on foot. Don't lower your guard since you think that this place is desolated. You might bump into a disastrous situation any time in the Black Rock Mountains. Moreover, this place is a dwelling place for all kinds of poisonous insects and ominous beasts, Shi Mu warned them as he continued to walk. The faces of Emoning and other people turned cold with fear as they heard these words. Consequently, they started to size up the surrounding area more carefully. However, the fact was that Shi Mu didn't care about the poisonous insects and ominous beasts. He had an aura of the three-headed ominous python around his body. So, he didn't care about these poisonous insects and beasts. In fact, he was wondering whether these beasts would still dare to pounce on him. The parrot cai had been dispirited and listless the entire route. But, it livened up as soon as Shi Mu's party entered the mountains. And, it continually flew up and down in the vicinity. In fact, it would grab some poisonous insects from time to time. It was playing merrily in high spirits. Your parrot is rather special. There are very rare spirit pets that possess the intelligence of this degree. Jin Xiaochai looked at Cai as he flew around in the vicinity and said, "My words will make you laugh, Master Jin. But, this parrot is nothing more than a boisterous bird. I wouldn't have brought it on this journey if it didn't possess exploration capabilities," Shi Mu replied with a mild smile. Suddenly, Shi Mu's complexion changed. He had stimulated the operation of vision-sharing ability with the parrot once as he had entered the mountains. So, he could see through the parrot's eyes that a dark cloud had appeared in the distance. And, it was advancing towards them while floating in the air. "What's wrong?" Jin Xiaochai noticed Shi Mu's facial expression. She then asked. "A sandstorm is approaching. We have to look for a leeward cave in order to hide," Shi Mu said loudly. The complexions of Jin Xiaochai and the others changed as they heard these words. Fortunately, there were plenty of caves in the Black Rock mountain range. So, it didn't take long before the group found a leeward cave at the foot of the mountain. They then went into hiding. The parrot cai was also called back by Shi Mu. The speed of the sandstorm was unusually fast. And, a tumultuous and menacing whistling sound rang out outside the cave not long after these people entered the cave. The sandstorm rose, and blotted out the sky. Then, the sky turned dark and gloomy, so much so that it seemed as if it was night. Numerous stones started to hit the mountain peaks as the sandstorm arrived. This gave rise to an intermittent burst of thundering and rumbling sounds. Even the huge mountain peak started to tremble under the overwhelming force of the sandstorm. Chapter 213, Disappearance of the Spirit Reserves. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Shi Mu and his team members had already encountered 2 or 3 sandstorms since the time they had set out on this journey. But, none of those sandstorms had been as huge as this one. Look at the scale of this sandstorm. I'm afraid that it might not stop today. Everyone, prepare to take a break this evening. We'll continue with our journey tomorrow. Jin Xiaochai looked towards the entrance of the cave and said. The other people complied. Each of them found a place, and sat down. Shi Mu looked towards the cave's entrance. He noticed some traces on the surface of the cave's walls. It seemed that it was a man-made cave. It was dark inside the cave, so much so that nothing was visible. Moreover, it was uncertain where this cave was leading to. Shi Mu seemed to be surprised. This place seemed to be a mining cave. However, this cave wasn't the only mining cave in that place. They had already come across a number of similar mining caves along their way, all of them had been in the periphery of the Black Rock Mountains. Moreover, the marks on these caves made it seem that they were ancient mines dating back several years. In fact, they had probably been abandoned hundreds of years ago. The other people also sized up the cave's environment with a curious look in their eyes. This is an abandoned spirit stone mine. You people must have caught sight of several other similar mines on the way, they were the same. Jin Xiaochai noticed everyone's facial expressions. She then said. Spirit Stone's mine. Shi Mu was left dumbfounded. Shi Mu had gone through some of the ancient books of the barbarian race when he was in the Holy Snow Palace. So, he knew that the barbarian wasteland was blessed with various kinds of metallic natural resources. But, he had never heard that the wasteland was also blessed with rich spirit stones. How could this place be in such a barren state if the barbarian race was so rich in spirit stones? These things really exist. Moning and the other 3 people looked flabbergasted. All this had been written down in some of the records of the sect's hidden history. Only the elders have access to them. You haven't seen them. Those records don't have anything particular that could make them stand out in the crowd, Jin Xiaochai explained. The barbarian wasteland was a fertile land thousands of years ago as per the sect's secret historical records. And, it was blessed with spirit stones of the 5 elements in plentiful quantities. So, all the major sects of the central mainland began to dispatch their people to these sites in order to extract resources. The land gradually lost its vitality due to the incessant excavation of resources, and turned into a bleak and desolate land that you see now, Jin Xiaochai continued to speak. Shi Mu and the others nodded thoughtfully as they heard these words. Shi Mu thought what would happen if a barbarian warrior would see this record in the sect. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The barbarian wasteland was reckoned as a restricted area thousands of years ago. It used to be laden with luxuriant vegetation and a beautiful green landscape back in those days. But, thousands of years had passed since that time. These people were successful practitioners. So, they could live for much longer than an average human could. Some could even live for 100 years or more. However, this time period was nothing more than a blip in the eyes of the planet. The sandstorm was howling outside the cave in a continuous manner. So, everyone looked low-spirited. The wild goose is lamenting. The long road seems never-ending. My anger is soaring because of this weather. I feel too weak and exhausted to get away from the wasteland. Courage and power have already exhausted. Finally, the strength can't rise again. The body has already died, and the soul has departed. Now the soul turns to ghost. How many sorrows rise from the desolate earth! I no longer return to my hometown. And, the attic-storied building is left all empty. Bai Shuixiu sat on one side. Suddenly, a soft humming voice resounded in the cave. The song was gentle. But, it revealed a feeling of impermanence of life. The song had a merciless feel to it. Everyone seemed to be influenced by the song. So, they chimed in one after another. Only Jin Xianhai's eyes were still gazing outside the cave. It couldn't be understood what she was thinking about. A few people smiled as Bai Shuixiu finally stopped singing. The gloomy atmosphere of the cave had become pleasant and lively by now. Hee hee. Sister Bai is a prodigy in magic arts. But, I never thought that her voice would be extremely melodious and pleasant. This is the first time that I've heard Sister Bai sing, Qian Xiang smiled, and said in an appreciating tone. Brother Qian is making fun of me. This is a folk song from my hometown. So, it's very close to my heart. It reminds me of some beautiful memories. I only hummed a few words unconsciously, Bai Shuixiu replied with a smile. I still don't know where Sister Bai's hometown is, Qian Xiang went a bit closer to Bai Shuixiu and asked. Then, the two of them began to talk in soft voices. Qian Xiang looked a little dense and crazy. But, he was extremely talkative. His sparkling words soon started to tickle Bai Shuixiu, and made her burst into a giggle. Consequently, her delicate laughter began to resound in the cave. A gloomy expression flashed in Mo Ning's eyes as he saw them talking blissfully. He then turned his head to the other side. A trace of smile bloomed on Shi Mu's face as he looked into the eyes of these 3 people. He then got up, and walked into the depths of the mine. He sat down cross-legged once he was at a considerable distance from the other people. Cai perched on his shoulder, and narrowed its eyes. It seemed as if it had fallen asleep. The sky outside the cave was soon covered with a curtain of darkness. Qian Xiang and Bai Shuixiu had stopped talking by now. And, each of them had started to look for a place to take rest. Time passed slowly. Peace prevailed inside the cave at this time. Only soft breathing sounds could be heard inside the cave. Shi Mu still sat cross-legged. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. Then, a scene emerged in his mind. There was a huge underground cave. A blazing and fiery red river of magma was slowly flowing inside it. Several fervent waves and air bubbles were ascending from the magma in a frequent manner. Surprisingly, a few fiery red fishes could be seen swimming in this scorching river of magma. Shi Tou, hurry up and come over here. There are some good things in the depths of the mine, the voice of the parrot rang in Shi Mu's mind. Shi Mu's brows twitched as his vision swept towards the other people in the cave. It was dark inside the cave, so much so that one couldn't even see their own fingers. But, this darkness couldn't have the slightest impact on Shi Mu. Jin Xiaochai, Mo Ning, and others were either asleep or sitting in meditation. Shi Mu got up, and quietly walked into the depths of the mine. Shi Mu's silhouette soon disappeared. Jin Xiaochai was sitting with her back rested against the stone wall. Suddenly, she opened her eyes, and looked in the direction where Shi Mu was headed. A trace of astonishment streaked across her beautiful eyes. Then, she stood up, and started to follow after him in stealth mode. Shi Mu accelerated his pace once there was a considerable distance between him and the other people. The depth of this cave had far surpassed Shi Mu's expectation. He continued to walk forward for a quarter of an hour. But, there was still no sign of an end to the cave. The cave's path gradually stretched downwards. The path had 7 or 8 twists and turns. But, there was only one road. So, there was no fear of taking the wrong path. The temperature inside the cave started to rise as he continued to walk downwards. The cave led him to an underground magma river. Shi Mu continued to walk downwards for 7 or 8 more minutes. Then, a passageway appeared before him. It was blocked by a huge block of rock. But, a few small holes could be seen on the surface of the big rock. Those holes revealed a red luminescence on the other side of the rock. It seemed that Shi Mu would have to pass through this place in order to reach the magma river. These rocks obviously couldn't block his path. Shi Mu gently pressed his hands against that huge block of rock, and pushed it aside. He then quickly entered into the space. He arrived at the underground cave. A scorching air wave hit his face as soon as he entered the underground area. The air wave was so hot that it could make anyone crazy. It seemed as if the air within Shi Mu's body was boiling hot every time he breathed in. Shi Tou, why did you come here? Cai flew over, and landed on Shi Mu's shoulder. Then, it shouted in an impatient manner. But, Shi Mu remained silent. He felt extremely hot and difficult to stand at that place even with his extremely strong physique. Suddenly, an idea crossed his mind. He then started to operate the art of the flaming red ape. After that, he inhaled a puff of scalding air wave into his body. Suddenly, the sense of scalding hot feeling disappeared without a trace. Shi Mu's face beamed with happiness. He inhaled a puff of scorching air of the magma once again. He felt a little stimulation in the chi embryo inside his lower abdomen. Quack! Quack! It's extremely hot here. Cai can't stand it anymore. You suck away this scorching heat. Then, it would become much cooler, Cai shouted while flapping its wings. Cai, what are the good things that you were talking about? Shi Mu asked without paying any attention to Cai's words. You have no vision. You're lucky that you became a top disciple of the Black Demon sect, the parrot said while gazing at Shi Mu with squinted eyes. Shi Mu shot a glaring look at the parrot. Well, well. I admit that whatever I said wasn't good. Fine. Can you see fishes swimming in the magma? They're the spirit beings that came into being due to the accumulation of fire essence and underground evil spirits in this magma over a period of thousands of years. The parrot shrunk its neck, and said in a complacent tone. The fire essence, Shi Mu's eyebrows twitched, and his eyes brightened up. As far as Shi Mu knew, fire essence was a rare and valuable treasure for a fire-style magician that could support his fire-style cultivation arts. So, they always yearned for this. Moreover, only the top grade or higher fire attribute spirit stones might contain the pure essence of fire. Don't talk so much. Shi Tou, grab me a fiery fish first, the parrot said in an anxious manner. You can also absorb the pure essence of fire. Shi Mu was surprised. Of course. And, don't look at me like this. Cai is also a fire attribute spirit beast. There isn't much difference between me and the fire phoenix, the parrot said in a boastful manner. Shi Mu didn't pay attention to the parrot's words. Instead, he started to read an incantation. Then, he gently waved his arm, and a white chain darted from his hand. He had done this by using the Qi Ring Pile magic technique. The white chain pierced the magma with a lightning speed. Then, a white light flashed. The white chain rolled up a chopstick-like long fish, and flew backwards. The parrot issued a cheerful sound. It was about to open its mouth in order to nip the flesh of the fish. Suddenly, a layer of red radiance bubbled up on the surface of Shi Mu's hand, and he caught the fish in his hand. Shi Mu didn't care about the parrot's discontented screeches. His eyebrows snapped into a frown as he examined the fish in his hand. The surface of the fish's body was translucent and red in color. It felt as light as a bird's feather in Shi Mu's hand. He glanced at the fish. Then, he waved his hand, and tossed it towards the parrot. Cai opened its mouth, and caught the fish. Then, it raised its neck a few times, and swallowed it down. Suddenly, a burst of faint red radiance emerged on the surface of its body. The color of its feathers seemed to have turned into a fiery red one. Shi Mu caught another fiery fish once he had flung the previous one to the parrot. After that, he started to operate the art of the flaming red ape. The layer of red radiance grew even brighter on his hand. Then, he grabbed another fish. The fish continued to struggle. But, it couldn't break itself free from his hand. The body of the fish shattered into pieces with a pop sound after a moment. The shattered fragments transformed into a wisp of scorching hot red qi. It was then sucked in by Shi Mu. Shi Mu's eyes brightened up. He stimulated the operation of the art of the flaming red ape as the qi seeped into his body. Then, the wisp of red qi got integrated into his qi embryo in the lower abdomen. The qi embryo in his lower abdomen surged, and its volume grew up a little. Even its color became a lot deeper than before. Shi Mu's heart was overwhelmed with happiness. He had never thought that such a trivial amount of fire essence of this fiery fish would turn out to be so nutritious for him. It could be said that it was almost equivalent to his 15 days of painstaking practice. Shi Tou, don't reap all the profits by yourself. I've discovered this place and these fiery fishes. So, catch a few fishes for me first. Shi Mu shot a glance at Cai. Then, a white chain was shot from his hand. It rolled out a few fishes, and threw them towards the parrot. The white chain continued to grab fishes out of the magma for a while. There were a large number of fiery fishes in the magma. Moreover, Shi Mu's actions were very light and skillful, so much so that he didn't even startle the other fishes. Shi Mu sat down cross-legged on the ground, and started to operate the art of the flaming red ape in order to refine the fishes. A wisp of fiery red qi flew, and submerged into Shi Mu's body. Then, it integrated into the qi embryo in his lower abdomen. The qi embryo grew even bigger and stronger than before. Then, its shape became round from its previous oval. And, it now looked like a fireball as it slowly rolled within his lower abdomen. It didn't feel like a burst or two of magical power either. Chapter 214, Ascension to Immortality Ceremony. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. The parrot Cai quickly gobbled up the 3 fiery fishes. After that, a layer of red radiance bubbled up on the surface of its body. The red radiance began to circulate over its body after a while. And, it eventually gathered into the feather on top of its head. The feather exuded a burst of bright radiance. Then, it turned into fiery red in color. This feather looked vibrant in the crowd of Cai's other feathers. Cai fluttered its wings, and started to issue cheerful cries. Shi Mu grasped 2 more fiery fishes effortlessly. But now, his body seemed to have reached its extreme limit since it couldn't withstand the flow of pure fire essence anymore. Therefore, Shi Mu couldn't continue to absorb the fire essence. Cai shifted its gaze. Its eyes twinkled as it looked towards Shi Mu. Shi Mu was still seated on the ground with his legs crossed. His entire body was shrouded in a layer of faint red radiance. The surrounding scorching air waves were streaming towards him from all directions, and were converging into his body like hundreds of rivers. In fact, his body was emanating intermittent bursts of powerful magic waves every now and then. Suddenly, Shi Mu raised his hands. Then, 2 white chains were shot out of his hands at the same time. They flashed into the magma, and curled out 4 or 5 fishes. Bang! Bang! The 5 fiery fishes exploded as soon as they flew to the top of Shi Mu's head. Then, they transformed into 5 beams of red light. After that, they submerged into Shi Mu's body, and turned into a tiny but fervent stream. Then, the tiny stream started to travel through his meridians, and converged into his lower abdomen. They then transformed into a tiny wisp of pure real qi, and wrapped itself around the cocoon-shaped qi embryo. This made the qi embryo even denser than before. The layer of faint red radiance glittering on Shi Mu's body started to gleam after a while. Shi Mu's qi embryo seemed to have finally reached its limit. It ruptured with a loud sound, and transformed into a mass of turbulent whirlwind. Then, it started to spin extremely fast like clusters of shining stars in the night sky. Each tiny stream of air in the whirlwind was the wisp of Xiantian real qi. It was the purest form of real qi. Shi Mu's magic power also began to flow around the whirlwind. But, it seemed to be a bit thinner than the whirlwind. Suddenly, Shi Mu opened his eyes. His face radiated with an ecstatic look. A brand new door had opened in front of him. He had eventually succeeded in setting up the Qi Palace in the lower abdomen, and had advanced to the Xiantian realm, a realm that every warrior dreamt of. He had ascended from the Hotian realm to the Xiantian realm. This was a very drastic change. The Xiantian real qi was purer than the Hotian real qi. The Xiantian real qi could be released out of the body in order to injure one's enemy from a distance. It could also be used in various other ways. The means of Xiantian real qi attack was far better than the Hotian attacks. In fact, a warrior's life expectancy would substantially increase after they had stepped into the Xiantian realm. The usual lifespan of a Xiantian warrior was 400 or 500 years. It could be considered more than enough time to pursue an even higher realm. Mother, your dear Mu has been successful. But, this is only the beginning. Your Mu will become much stronger in the future. He would also become the most formidable warrior in the world. Shi Mu's eyes glistened with a firm and resolute look. He then slowly stood up. Suddenly, an idea crossed his mind. A wisp of real qi gushed out from the qi palace in his lower abdomen. It traveled through the meridians, and started to circulate in his body. The surface of his body emanated a burst of dazzling red light like a blazing flame. The red light surged up violently, and emitted a fervent heat wave. The hot air wave triggered a wave of huge air pressure that spread in all directions. The parrot Cai wasn't far from Shi Mu. So, it fell prey to the massive current of fervent air. It issued loud shrieks. And, its body was blown away towards the side of the cave's wall like a piece of straw. In fact, it was about to bump against the wall. Fortunately, it responded quickly. It fluttered its wings fiercely a few times when it was only 10 feet away from the wall. It quickly stabilized its body as a result, and prevented itself from knocking against the stone wall. Cai then flew around in the cave. It was about to issue bursts of resentful and whining cries. Suddenly, Shi Mu's hand moved backwards, and pulled out the black blade and short stick from behind his back. Then, he put together the long meteoric iron blade. After that, he began to practice the 13 series of Gale Force blade art while standing at the same spot. The Xian real qi had bulged to a plentiful amount in his body, so much so that Shi Mu could feel that it was about to spill out at any moment. 13 distinct blade shadows appeared around the blade every time Shi Mu wielded it. He unleashed the Gale Force blade art to its acme with the blade in his hand. The never-ending flow of blade shadows was so dazzling that they could make one's eyes blurred with brightness. Shi Mu's silhouette glistened amid this dazzling light. It seemed as if a dozen or more individuals were practicing the blade art at the same time. Each blade light seemed like a stream of light. They moved in a crisscross pattern, and looked quite dazzling. Shi Mu's terrifying qi burst out, and proliferated in all directions, with him being the center. And, these explosions triggered a gale in the surroundings. Several bursts of flickering lights could be seen sparkling on the ground. This made a few crumbs of stones roll up from the ground from time to time. Cai had acted in an extremely tactful manner. And, it had fled to a distant place. It possessed only a little bit of strength. However, each blade shadow carried enormous might with it. So, Cai's body would have been severed into 2 segments even if a single blade shadows had brushed past it. Shi Mu poured out a little more strength into his hands. This activated the 2 magic characters carved on the surface of the extended blade. Then, a layer of fire bubbled up on the tip of the blade. Bursts of green light emerged on the blade's hilt at the same time. Buzz! The speed of the blade shadows accelerated to twice of its original speed. Suddenly, Shi Mu's eyes exuded a strange look. The Gale Force blade art began to whirl in his mind with a lightning speed. Ha! Shi Mu issued a loud shout as he infused his Xian real qi into the black blade. Then, he flicked his arm, and wielded the blade horizontally in midair. Suddenly, it seemed that the 13 blade shadows hovering around the extended blade had received a summon. They flashed back, and submerged into the blade. Then, a bright red luminescence bubbled up on the surface of the blade along with a cloud of fire that flared up vehemently. Buzz! A half-moon-shaped red blade light appeared amid the surging clouds of fire. It was 10 feet long. Then, it slashed towards the front like a billowing wind that sweeps the cloud away. The blade light left a cut on the cave's wall with a loud rumbling sound. The flame flashed on the stone wall. Then, the crumbs of stones scattered in all directions. A several feet deep pit had been blasted out on the wall. And, the 100 feet long stone wall had been left to shake violently by the impact. The fragments of stones sprinkled down like rain. The situation returned to normal after a while. Shi Mu was exalted. He received the blade, and stood quietly. Li Qinghai had once told Shi Mu that the Gale Force blade art was reckoned as a Xian level blade art before it was split into many stages. He had been trying to figure it out all these years. And, he had finally grasped the entire essence of it as he had entered the Xian realm. He could now combine the 13 blade shadows into one since he had become a Xian warrior. He had reached the proficiency level of this art through a comprehensive study. And, he had mastered the Xian level blade art to its acme. This move is called the billowing cloud art, he murmured. The blade art like the billowing cloud art possessed an unimaginable might. Shi Mu was presently at the primary stage of the Xian realm. But, even a Xian advanced stage warrior couldn't withstand his attack if he used his extended blade to display the Xian level blade art. Shi Mu was exhilarated in his heart. An idea crossed his mind as his eyes gazed towards the extended blade in his hand. He twisted his hands, and separated the extended blade into 2 parts, a blade and a stick. Shi Mu moved his hand behind his body, and returned the black blade to his back. Then, he held up the short stick in front of his chest. He thundered loudly, and the short stick in his hand transformed into a black shadow. He then cast out a set of firm and ferocious murderous stick art. Each stick shadow looked incomparably heavy. But, it turned out that it was the stick art that would produce overlapping layers of stick shadows. The swift and fierce blade shadow of the Gale Force blade art was different from the layers of black stick shadows. The stick shadows had an ambience of heaviness along with a pure murderous intention. It seemed as if it was a mysterious handheld magic wand that had appeared from the depths of hell. Die! Shi Mu roared loudly. His eyes dazzled with a murderous aura. A layer of blue light floated on the surface of the short stick. Then, all the 6 layers of the wind shadow magic spell got activated. The real chi surged within Shi Mu's lower abdomen at the same time, and gushed into his arms. Then, his arms moved, and wielded the short stick in a fierce manner. Suddenly, the 7 overlapping layers of the short stick's shadows rushed forward while carrying a heavy oppressive pressure along with them. In fact, it seemed as if they were the shadows of 7 mountains. A series of deafening explosive sounds rang out in the air. Several overlapping layers of stick shadows bombarded on the other side of the mountain wall like a sea wave. Bursts of explosive sounds were heard as they struck the wall. And, the wall was left to shake for a moment. Dozens of pits blasted out on the wall, each of them was as big as a lower millstone. Several crumbs of stones spread in all directions in a disorderly manner at the same time. Shi Mu moved several dozen feet in a flash, and received his stick. He then stood still. A gleam of exhilaration appeared on his face. The art of 7 killer sticks indeed deserved to be a Xian martial art. Its imposing aura didn't seem to be as formidable as that of the billowing clouds art that Shi Mu had just comprehended. But, the enemy could get time to resist only the first layer if all the 7 layers were to be shot in succession. There was no way that the enemy could resist the second layer. Moreover, there would still be the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th layers that would be left to deal with even if one managed to succeed in destroying the second layer. Therefore, the overwhelming power of this art was matchless. However, this technique didn't come without any flaw. It required a massive amount of real chi to operate properly. The last shot had sucked up almost 50% of Shi Mu's real chi in an instant. Pa! 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 Suddenly, a burst of crisp and sonorous sound of applause was heard. Shi Mu's complexion changed. He turned his head to look into the direction where the sound was coming from. Jin Xiaochai stood at the entrance of the cave. Shi Mu hadn't noticed that she had been standing there for a long time. There was a vivid smile on her face, and her hands were moving in a gesture of clapping. Master Jin, Shi Mu quickly retracted the startled expression from his face. He then returned the short stick to his back. So, it's Master Jin Xiaochai who has showed up. Cai has already met Master Jin. Cai flew from the side, and landed on Shi Mu's shoulder before Shi Mu could say anything. Accept my greetings, Cai. Jin Xiaochai flashed a mild smile. Shut up. Cai fluttered its wings, and was about to say something again. But, Shi Mu stretched out his hand, and tapped the parrot's head in order to prevent it from blabbering any further. May I ask when Master Jin showed up here? Shi Mu turned his head and asked. I arrived here a long time ago. You're a little slower than what I had expected earlier. But, you've finally stepped into the Xian realm. So, feel free to call me senior sister from now onwards, Jin Xiaochai replied. She walked to Shi Mu's side and stood firm at a distance of nearly 10 feet from Shi Mu. I would like to express my gratitude towards Master Jin for bestowing me with a Qian Yuan pill. Shi Mu cupped his hands in obeisance and said. A Qian Yuan pill can't be considered a substantial contribution to your success. But, you've advanced to the Xian realm nonetheless. So, do you have any plans now? Jin Xiaochai waved her hand, and changed the thread of conversation. Sister Jin, what does it mean? We're heading to the heavenly demon sect, aren't we? Shi Mu was struck dumb for a moment. Then, he asked in a surprised tone. Jin Xiaohai's elegant eyebrows creased. She glared at Shi Mu coldly, and said, Didn't you say that you would go to look for her once you break through the Xian realm? Shi Mu's vision flashed as he said, It's natural. But, we've been sent by our sect on a mission. Moreover, we've already infiltrated deep into the barbarian wasteland. It's only natural that I can't turn back at this juncture. I'll give priority to the assigned work. After that, I'll rush to the Wanlong Mountains to look for her." Jin Xiaochai shot a glance at Shi Mu. She then said, "I'm afraid she'd have already left the Wanlong Mountains by the time you reach there." "What? What do you mean?" Shi Mu was alarmed to hear these words. He then asked, "Have you ever heard of the Ascension to Immortality ceremony of the Lu Shan Kingdom?" Jin Xiaochai asked. "No, I haven't heard of it. But, how is this matter related to the demon witch of Tianyin?" Shi Mu knitted his brows and asked. Shi Mu had heard the name of Lu Shan Kingdom before. It was the most powerful nation in the central mainland of the eastern continent. It could be said that it was the core of the entire human race of the eastern continent's mainland. However, the matter of this ceremony had never reached Shi Mu's ears before. "You keep on proclaiming that you truly adore the demon witch of Tianyin. You don't even know her name. I wonder what other things you know about her." Jin Xiaochai shot a glance towards Shi Mu once again. Then, she let out a soft sigh, and spoke up in a spooky manner. Chapter 215, Transcending Heaven Immortal Cult. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. I had made an agreement with her a long time ago. Now, I've stepped into the Xian Tian realm. So, she'll tell me her name, Shi Mu replied. Her name is Ximen Shuet. Don't call her the demon witch of Tianyin again. It was a name given to her by outsiders arbitrarily. The elegant brows of Jin Xiaochai slightly creased as she said. Ximen Shuet, Shi Mu's eyes brightened up. This name seemed quite befitting to the demon witch of Tianyin's appearance and disposition. Her snow-like elegant white dress added the aura of a heavenly fairy to her graceful appearance. What is this ascension to immortality ceremony? And, demon witch, what relation does it have with Ximen Shuet? Shi Mu asked. The Transcending Heaven Immortal Cult is considered to be the #1 sect of the Lu Shan Kingdom. This grand ceremony is held by it once in every 30 years. Those who have already become Xian Tian warriors before the age of 30, or a star-grade magician, are qualified to participate in this ceremony under the recommendation of their respective sects, Jin Xiaochai explained. Shi Mu felt a powerful jolt in his heart as he heard these words. He felt that the conditions for enrollment in this ceremony were extremely harsh. But it could be said this ceremony was extraordinary owing to these harsh conditions. The ceremony selects 3 men and 3 women. Those 6 people are then sent to a place called the Immortal Palace of Seclusion. Then, the Transcending Heaven Immortal Cult supplies a large amount of resources to provide a proper training to these people. This helps them in rapidly promoting their cultivation to the earth grade. But, those who enter the Immortal Palace of Seclusion don't appear in this world again. It's said that they ascend to the immortal domain, and become an angel. Jin Xiaochai continued to speak. Can it be that? Shi Mu felt a gripping sensation in his heart as he heard these words. He had a premonition of something unpleasant. Right. She has already taken a firm decision to participate in the Ascension to Immortality ceremony, Jin Xiaochai said in a single breath. A premonition had already sprouted in Shi Mu's heart a moment ago. But, an inexplicable feeling bubbled up in his heart as he received the confirmation from Jin Xiaochai. Miss Shui was determined to seek this path since her early childhood. Moreover, this is her master's expectation from her. She's considered to be exceedingly rare in the central mainland owing to her innate qualities and strength. So, the possibility that she might get selected if she participates in the ceremony is on the higher side. She'll be separated from us once she gets selected. Then, you'll never get to see her again, Jin Xiaochai spoke as she looked at Shi Mu. That's it. I'll have to practice rigorously so that I can also become an immortal. Then, I can go to find her. Shi Mu clenched his hands. What's so good about ascending to the rank of immortal? This is a ruthless natural law. The road to immortality is nothing but vast and indistinct. You'll be separated from the world once you become an immortal. This is a road of no return. You really think that you two can be together once you achieve the immortality? Jin Xiaochai sneered, and said in a casual manner. Shi Mu was left speechless for a while. Come along with me to look for her if you truly like her. Miss Shui has a strong personality and an extremely opinionated temperament. So, she's unlikely to change her decision because of an outsider once she has made up her mind. But, she seems a little different when it comes to you. Otherwise, she wouldn't have made that agreement with you in the first place. Jin Xiaochai let out a soft sigh as she said. I see. This is what you wanted me to promise you at that time. Well, I don't know what your true intentions are, but, it seems that both of us have a common goal to persuade her to not to participate in this ceremony. Shi Mu nodded as he said. I'm afraid that Miss Shui would have already departed to the Lu Shan kingdom through the teleportation magic spell. So, there would be no use left to return to the Wanlong Mountains now. Moreover, the Ascension to Immortality ceremony and our Heavenly Demon Sect's Demon Yang ceremony will be held almost at the same time. We should first rush to the Heavenly Yu City, the capital city of Lu Shan Kingdom, to find Miss Shui. Then, we might return to the Heavenly Demon Sect on time. As far as I know, the relationship between our Heavenly Demon Sect and Transcending Heaven Immortal Cult is sensitive. A lot of trouble will be caused if our identities are revealed. Would you still dare to go there? Jin Xiaochai said while looking at Shi Mu. Certainly. Shi Mu nodded without any hesitation. Good. Jin Xiaochai nodded, and turned towards the exit of the underground cave. Shi Mu raised his head, and looked at the ceiling of the cave. His eyes flickered. It seemed as if he was thinking about something. Cai seemed to have noticed Shi Mu's mental state. Therefore, it didn't enter into the clamorous mode that could disturb him. Instead, it stayed to one side, and started to comb its feathers with its beak. Next day at the crack of dawn, the sandstorm outside the cave was still as fierce as before. Shi Mu sat in meditation with his legs crossed in the corner of the cave. Brother Shi, bring me a bucket of water. Jin Xiaochai turned her head, and said while looking towards Shi Mu. Elder sister Jin, this is the last bucket of water. Shi Mu flashed a bitter smile as he said. Haven't you carried enough water? Jin Xiaohai's delicate pupils glared at him as she said. You continued to take baths frequently throughout this journey. So, it was only natural that we would run out of the water soon. Shi Mu curled up his lips as he replied. This dilapidated place is full of ash. Elder sister Jin is so beautiful. She obviously needs to bathe to keep herself clean. The parrot beside Shi Mu looked at Jin Xiaochai in a flattering manner, and shouted out. Jin Xiaochai smiled. She then took out a round green kernel from her storage ring, and tossed it towards the parrot. She had robbed these fruits kernels from Shi Mu's space. A complacent look flashed through the parrot's eyes. It bit the fruit's kernels, and swallowed it down after chewing it a few times. We should wait until we find a water source since it's the last bucket of water left with us, Jin Xiaochai said. There's a water source not far from here as per the map. There's no specific location for that place. But, I don't think that finding it should be a big problem, Shi Mu said. The conversation between Shi Mu and Jin Xiaochai left Moning and others in the cave startled. And, they all looked towards Shi Mu in unison. Moning's complexion changed, and his eyes revealed a trace of amazement. An unfathomable aura still loomed around Shi Mu's body. But, it seemed to have undergone a subtle change. The wisp of a strong and dignified aura of a Xian Tian powerhouse could be felt around him. Qian Xiong and Bai Shuixiu looked dumbfounded. Young Master Shi, congratulations for successfully establishing the Qi Palace, and stepping into the Xian Tian realm. Bai Shuixiu was the first one to speak out. She got up, and expressed her greetings. Congratulations, young Master Shi. Moning recovered from his awestruck state. He then got up, and congratulated Shi Mu along with Qian Xiang. "You people don't have to be overcourteous." Shi Mu beckoned with his hand. Moning and others sat down on the ground. But, they adjusted their positions so that Shi Mu and Jin Xiaochai could receive considerably large and independent spaces for themselves. The sandstorm finally receded later in the noon. Shi Mu and his team members set out on their journey once again. Shi Mu took the lead, and walked in the front. He relied on the experience that he had gained during his stay in the Flying Raven tribe. They finally arrived in a mountain valley after an hour. There was a small pool in front of them. The perimeter of this pool was nearly 50 or 60 feet. The water surface looked limpid. The surrounding area was also clean as far as the eye could see. Jin Xiaochai and others' eyes lit up. They took large strides to walk towards the pool. "Hold on." Shi Mu's brows creased. He then reached out to prevent Jin Xiaochai from approaching the pool. "What's the matter?" Jin Xiaochai asked in a puzzled tone. "Cai, you go and take a look around carefully." Shi Mu didn't reply to her. Instead, he ordered the parrot that sat on his shoulder. "Shi Tiu, Cai is thirsty." Cai was about to mumble something. Suddenly, it noticed that it was being stared at by Shi Mu. It immediately flapped its wings, and flew away. A quarter of an hour later, Shi Mu stood motionless. He hadn't uttered a single word this entire time. "It seems that there's nothing suspicious around the pool. Hurry up, and top up the water. We have to continue with our journey." Jin Xiaochai looked at Shi Mu. She felt relieved in her heart. She then said while beckoning with her hand. Moning and others were exhilarated. All of them quickly took out their water bags, and walked in the direction of the pool. Cai also came back at the same time. It excitedly skimmed over the water surface. It then stretched out its claws, and started to splash water with them. Jin Xiaochai also walked towards the pool. She wanted to wash and clean her body properly. The dry weather of the wasteland rendered an uncomfortable feeling to her skin. Shi Mu didn't say anything. He closely followed after them. However, his eyes were overly attentive, and were hovering in all directions. He still had a vague feeling that they had surely missed out something crucial. Jin Xiaochai quickly arrived at the poolside. The ring on her left middle finger emanated a bright silver radiance, and a big wooden water barrel appeared in her hands. She had lowered the bucket to dip it into the water when her hair stood on their ends. She then caught a glimpse of a thick and white skeleton at the bottom of the pool. Then, something strange happened. A beam of yellow light gleamed behind her body. It was accompanied by a black-striped gigantic tiger that sprang out from there. It ferociously pounced towards her while carrying a strong gust of wind with it. The tiger brandished its incisive claws while it was in mid-air. Nearly 10 feet long yellow light blade blotted out the sky as it plummeted down towards Jin Xiaohai's back. "Be careful!" Shi Mu shouted. He pinched the fingers of his right hand, and stimulated a magic art as he warned her. Consequently, a mass of white qi fled from his hand, and quickly elongated into a 10 feet long white qi chain. It then rushed towards the giant tiger in order to fetter it. However, Jin Xiaohai's timing was truly amazing. She tossed the barrel off her hand, and whirled around. A black leather whip had already appeared in her hand by this time. She flicked her hand, and the whip started to dance around her body in a fierce manner. It quickly took the shape of a black light shield which was 10 feet in perimeter. The black shield was well prepared to receive the yellow light blade. Boom! 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 A series of muffled sounds rang out in the air. The yellow light exploded a number of times in the air. Then, the black light shield experienced a fit of violent tremors. After that, it was rooted and dispersed. The remaining half of the yellow light blade struck her body. Suddenly, a layer of golden light emerged and shrouded her body. The yellow light blades gradually fell on her body. But, it felt like it was trying to cut at the smooth surface of an ice ball. It changed its direction as it glided away from her skin, and diverted to the other side. However, the golden shield also dimmed down at an incredibly fast pace in this process. The tiger's claws trembled, and a few inches long claw light flashed out. The throbbing claw light looked like undulating waves of light. It had arrived extremely close to Jin Xiaohai's neck in a flash. Suddenly, a white chi chain pounced towards the tiger, and fastened it firmly on the spot. Roar! An earth-shattering roar of the tiger rang out in the air, and the chi chain was broken into pieces. Those fragments then turned into tiny crystal lights. Jin Xiaochai seized this opportunity. Her stature flashed a few times, and she fled almost 10 feet away from the tiger. The tiger broke free from the shackles, and landed on the ground between Shi Mu and Jin Xiaochai. The trace of ominous glint flashed across its eyes. Shi Mu discovered that this tiger had 4 eyes. Moreover, an unusual magic character was engraved between its eyebrows. Its gigantic body was emanating an extremely tyrannical aura. It was either a Xiantian advanced stage or a consummate stage ominous beast. It would seem like a considerable amount of time had passed ever since the gigantic tiger had appeared, launched its attack on Jin Xiaochai, and was interrupted by Shi Mu. But, all this had happened in a couple of seconds. Moning and others who were filling their water bags responded, and moved into action at this time. Bai Shuixiu mumbled something, and a layer of blue water quickly shrouded her entire body. She then jumped, and gracefully stood on the water surface. After that, she began to walk on the waves until she reached the center of the pool. She waved the wand she held in her right hand, and a several feet high stream of water galloped from within the pool. It then soared to the sky while carrying her on top of it. It couldn't be said when a sword had also appeared in Moning's hand. In addition, several blue sword chi had emerged on the surface of his body in the manner in which a peacock spread its tail. Suddenly, the blue sword chi exploded, and transformed into a several feet wide cloud of hoarfrost. Then, Moning disappeared amid it. Qianxiang held an iron mace in each of his hands. He moved a few steps backwards. Suddenly, the magic character between the tiger's eyebrows exuded a beam of yellow light. Then, a layer of earth yellow light wrapped its entire body. It moved, and drilled into the ground. After that, it disappeared from sight without a trace. Chapter 216, A Tiger in the Dream. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Not good, Shi Mu thought as he saw this. Brother Qianxiang, watch out! Bai Shuixiu shouted loudly from far above the water surface. She raised the wand in her hand, and a layer of blue light lit up magnificently on its surface. Qianxiang had already drawn a few steps backwards from the edge of the pool. He was almost 7 or 8 feet away from where Jin Xiaochai currently stood. He had barely heaved a sigh of relief when Bai Shuixiu's voice rang in his ears. It stole away the color of his face, and left him thunderstruck. A yellow luminescence had appeared on the ground behind his body. Then, the gigantic 4-eyed tiger sprang out from within the ground. Its body trembled, and its long yellow and black striped tail instantly turned into a long shadow. It then swept over while carrying a tyrannical and imposing momentum. Qianxiang whirled around quickly, but he noticed that he didn't have enough time to dodge the attack. Suddenly, an idea crossed his mind like an electric current. A layer of black radiance bubbled up on the surfaces of the 2 iron maces in his hands. Then, 2 groups of black lights violently danced in his hands to meet the shadow. Bang! A loud rumble was heard. Qianxiang felt an overwhelming force plummeting down on his hands as the black light came in contact with the shadow. It seemed impossible to resist. The place between his thumb and forefinger received a severe jolt. The 2 iron maces couldn't withstand the jolt, and got tilted. Then, they were sent flying in the air. Even Qianxiang's stature couldn't help but stagger for a while. The shadow halted for an instant. Then, it darted towards Qianxiang's chest. Suddenly, a vast stretched mass of cold air emerged and arrived in front of Qianxiang. It was blue in color. It then condensed into a blue ice wall. Bang! A crisp and loud sound resounded. The ice wall shattered into smithereens with a loud explosion as soon as the shadow collided with it. However, the shadow was also blocked off. The complex pattern of the tiger's tail finally came into view. However, Qing Xiang looked a bit slow and sluggish now. It couldn't be said where he had pulled out that dark green small shield from. However, it dramatically rose to the size of a 10 feet long shield, and stood in front of him. And, Qing Xiang began to retreat in the meantime. Suddenly, a series of metal clanging sounds resounded in the air. A dozen or more yellow light blades whistled, and flashed past the shield. The dark green small shield ruptured and got exterminated. Then, the light blades struck Qing Xiang's body in a crisscross pattern. They landed on the ground behind him, and left a few traces of blood on the ground. Qing Xiang still maintained a retreating posture. He retreated a few steps. Then, his body crumbled into pieces like a collapsed city wall. He turned into a pile of meat lumps in a twinkling of an eye. Blood gushed out from his body, and permeated the entire place. Bai Shuixiu's complexion turned deathly pale as she saw this from the top of the water pillar. The parrot had been hovering in midair this entire time. It was even more petrified when it saw this. It started to issue a series of quack sounds. It fluttered its wings, and flew even higher in the sky. Suddenly, a half-moon-shaped red blade light and a black whip shadow galloped from two different directions. Shi Mu and Jin Xiaochai weren't far from the pool. And, they scuttled towards the pool with a flying speed. The tiger disappeared from the sight once again as a yellow luminescence flashed on its body. The blade light and the whip shadow missed its target, and landed in air. Boom! A loud explosion was heard amid the cloud of blue hoarfrost was on the other side. Ning's silhouette flashed, and staggered out of the blue hoarfrost. The watery blue sword had already disappeared from his hand. A long wound could be clearly seen on his back, it was almost the size of a palm of the hand. Fresh blood was seeping out of his wound. The black whip and the half-moon-shaped red blade chased after the light, and submerged in the blue cloud. The cloud rolled and soon dissipated. But, the tiger had again disappeared along with the cloud. Shi Mu and Jin Xiaochai had arrived at the side of the pool now. They had formed a battle formation. They had taken a pincer-like position with the pool as the corner and Ning in the middle in order to protect him. Watch out! Jin Xiaochai couldn't complete her words. Shi Mu immediately turned around. He saw that the gigantic tiger had made its move, and had plunged from the ground. The tiger flicked its front claws. Chi! Chi! A shrill grating sound was heard. After that, a dozen or more yellow light blades galloped towards Shi Mu. Shi Mu hastily pinched a golden magic charm in his hand, and a thick layer of golden light engulfed his entire body as a protective shield. Shi Mu turned around at the same time. The black blade in his hand flared up magnificently. Then, blossoming clouds of fire emerged on its surface. Shi Mu wielded his blade, and a half-moon-shaped red blade light flashed in the air amid the violently rolling clouds of fire. Bang! A series of crackling sounds was heard. The red and yellow lights collided, and ruptured in mid-air. But, a few yellow light blades still survived the explosion. They struck the golden shield that was around Shi Mu's body. Bursts of dazzling yellow luminescence appeared in the air as it collided with the shield. An overwhelming and anti-seismic force surged up vehemently on his golden shield. Shi Mu couldn't withstand this force, and was compelled to draw back 3 or 4 steps. He then stopped, and stabilized his body. But, the golden light shield around his body had become considerably dim and extremely thin. Fortunately, this was the golden star charm that was drawn on the 3-headed python's skin. The extraordinary might it possessed could be placed on par with a high-grade magic charm. Therefore, it had repelled the greater part of the beast attack. But, it seemed that it wouldn't be able to resist a similar kind of attack again in its present state. A shrill and ear-piercing sound rang out in the air. Then, an arm-thick shadow of the black whip fluttered high in the sky. It plummeted down towards the four-eyed tiger with an alarming speed. The whip shadow was about to land on the tiger's body. Suddenly, the magic character between the tiger's eyebrows emitted a bright yellow light. Then, the tiger sneaked into the ground once again. Boom! A loud explosive sound rang out. A 3-feet-long stick dashed forward. It was shrouded in a layer of blue light. It then drilled straight into the ground where the tiger had just escaped like a shadow. Only 2/3 of the stick was sticking outside the surface of the ground. Ping! It seemed that a part of the tiger's body had been terribly struck by the short stick. 1/3 of the stick had already pierced the ground. But, it was stopped halfway. Then, it couldn't penetrate the ground any further. Chi! A whistling sound resounded once again. Suddenly, the black whip shadow turned fuzzy, and transformed into 100 or more large black ropes. Then, they captured and bundled the beast firmly together. The gigantic tiger issued a loud roar as it attempted to shrug off the fetter. Another golden beam of light was shot at the same time. It quickly condensed into a long golden chain that was as thick as a finger. Then, it tied up the tiger, and strangled its movement. Shi Mu leapt and rode on the back of the tiger. And, his palms turned into a pair of sparkling and translucent fists. His fists then turned fuzzy, and transformed into 7 or 8 misty white fist shadows. Then, they bombarded on the tiger's head with brute force. A burst of yellow luminescence emerged on the surface of the tiger's body as a protective shield as soon as Shi Mu's fists fell on it. However, the might of the stone-breaking fist had already exceeded 10,000 pounds when Shi Mu had instilled his Xian Tian real qi into his fists. He could achieve this feat only after he had stepped into the Xian Tian realm. The yellow luminescence on the tiger's body dimmed, and subsequently died away within a matter of few breaths. The head of the tiger had been reduced to a pulp after a string of rapid thudding sounds. Moreover, 3 out of its 4 eyes had burst out its eye sockets. A spurt of blood gushed out from its head in a torrent. Its massive body soon collapsed to the ground. Its body continued to make a few futile twitches. Then, it turned completely motionless. Shi Mu finally turned over, and got down. He then heaved a sigh of relief. Jin Xiaochai and others also felt relieved in their hearts. Shi Mu stared at the gigantic tiger's corpse. Then, the storage ring in his hand sparkled, and emitted a magnificent luster. After that, a red animal skin bag appeared in his hand. He pointed the bag's mouth towards the tiger's head. Then, the magic power surged within his body, and the beast soul bag gleamed with a blood-red luster. After that, the bag started to issue a suction force. A miniature image of the gigantic yellow tiger flashed, and disappeared into the beast soul bag. Shi Mu wouldn't hesitate to collect as many beast souls as possible as long as he had an opportunity. It was because of 2 major reasons Yan Luo needed them, and Shi Mu himself needed them in order to promote his totem beast soul. Jin Xiaochai and others watched Shi Mu's strange action. But, none of them considered it to be inappropriate. After all, these beast souls were totally useless for them. Near the pool, Bai Shuixiu's eyes got smeared with a touch of grief as she looked at the badly fragmented and tormented body of Jian Xiang. Sister Bai, life and death is just an ordinary thing for us disciples. We should bury Brother Qian properly. He was truly worthy of being one of the masters of our sect. Mo Ning's voice resounded from behind her. Bai Shuisui nodded. Mo Ning, you take care of Jian Xiang, and bury him properly. After that, bring a piece of animal skin to me. Jin Xiaochai pointed at the tiger's corpse and said. The remaining things are yours, Shi Mu added. Mo Ning and Bai Shuixiu glanced at Shi Mu, and expressed their gratitude. The tiger was a Xian Tian level fierce beast. Each and every part of its body, its bones, blood, gallbladder and other things were extremely valuable and rare. At nightfall, the magnificent luster of the silver moonlight was similar to the running water. It seemed as if it was pouring down in torrents over the Black Rock mountain range. Shi Mu sat cross-legged on a black boulder in the open area. He exhibited the posture of the moon-swallowing art. He closed his eyes, and soon slipped into the dream. However, the dreamland that greeted him this time was an unfamiliar scene. Shi Mu took a broad view of the surroundings, and saw that his surroundings were piled with clusters of dense and sky-soaring gigantic trees. It constituted a beautiful image of a vast stretched primitive forest. The forest was permeated with strong presence of spiritual energy. The water droplets could be seen on the tip of the tree leaves that had already condensed into a tiny grain of white jade. A drop of water loaded with spiritual energy fell from a branch of the gigantic tree. A shaggy small beast stood below the same tree. It opened its mouth, and swallowed the condensed water droplet. The soft fur of the little beast became a lot softer and glossier. The beast looked quite satisfied with this result. It then closed its eyes, and fell into a deep slumber. Shi Mu was astounded. He retracted his vision and found himself incarnated into the white ape. He stood in an open space somewhere in the forest. His hands were hanging alongside his body. A 30-feet-long monstrous white tiger stood on the opposite side. It wasn't far from him. An ominous glint flashed through its eyes as it stared at him fiercely. The tiger roared loudly. The white tiger dashed towards the white ape while carrying a strong gust of wind along with it. It was almost as if an arrow had left the bow. It sprang up from the ground when it was 20 or 30 feet away from the ape. The tiger's claws turned fuzzy in midair, and hundreds of claw shadows cascaded down towards the white ape. The white ape thundered as it pounded its arms in the air. Numerous misty white fist shadows burst forth, and dashed towards the claw shadows that had pervaded the sky. Bursts of light sparked at the point where the fist shadows intersected with the claw shadows. Such a powerful collision set off a strong gust of wind. It then quickly took the form of a whirlwind, and started to roll everywhere while carrying dust and gravel from the surroundings. It seemed like the entire sky was shrouded with a curtain of sand and gravel. Even the forest had turned gloomy in this chaotic situation. The surrounding towering trees looked long and narrow against the background of this gloominess. The might of the claw shadow gradually weakened. A trace of apprehension finally crawled into the white tiger's eyes. It turned around, and fled towards a distant place. The white ape roared loudly. It took a few large strides, and dashed behind the tiger at a lightning speed. It caught up with the tiger in an instant. It then stretched out its right hand. Suddenly, a large stick shadow swept over like the tiger's tail. A golden gleam flashed in the ape's eyes. It then raised its arm twice as high as before, and grabbed something. It was the tiger's tail. In fact, it had grabbed it with such precision that the stick shadow dissipated in an instant. The ape grabbed the tiger's tail with both its hands. It then exerted all its might to pull the tiger backwards. The tiger issued a miserable screech in agony, and stopped to move forward. The ape seized this opportunity, and climbed up the tiger's back. Then, it tightly grasped the fur around the tiger's neck with its hands. It pressed its legs firmly against the tiger's body to ride on its back. The tiger thundered, and went into a rampage. It began to charge around the forest at an astonishing speed, so much so that it looked like a fleeting white shadow. It frequently jumped, leapt, and took rapid turns in order to toss the ape off its back. But, it couldn't shake the white ape off its back, no matter what methods it resorted to. The ape seemed to be enjoying the thrill of this astonishing speed. It issued a few cheerful shouts while sitting on the tiger's back. The tiger finally calmed down after an hour of rampage. It issued a soft roar resignedly, and let the white ape ride on its body. It didn't struggle anymore. But, the white ape turned over, and got down from the tiger's back. The white tiger was startled. It glanced at the ape with a fearful look in its eyes. It didn't show the slightest sign of escaping. The ape swiftly climbed up a nearby peach tree. It then picked 2 large peaches, and gave one of them to the white tiger. The tiger hesitated for a moment. But, it made up its mind to eat the peach as it saw the enthusiasm of the white ape. The tiger tasted the peach. Then, it took a few mouthfuls of peach. Soon, the fruit was finished. The white ape issued a few mocking shouts. It seemed as if it was saying that this peach hadn't been enough for the tiger. But, its attitude appeared a little friendly. Then, the ape extended its hand and passed another peach to the tiger. The tiger raised its right claw to grasp it. But, the peach vanished before the tiger could touch it. The tiger's claw ended up hitting the air. The white ape contorted its face, and burst out into laughter. The tiger pounced on the ape, but the ape dashed forward with a lightning speed. The tiger was left empty-handed once again. The two beasts continued to wander around the forest while issuing cheerful shouts, one of them in the lead, and the other one following behind. Chapter 217, Taking Different Ways. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Shi Mu was watching with keen interest and pleasure. Suddenly, it turned dark in front of his eyes. He then woke up from his dream. Shi Mu felt a little strange in his heart. Why did he have such kind of a dream? Was it possible that it had something to do with the Xian Tian tiger that he had encountered during the day? He closed his eyes, and examined the insides of his body. He found that there was nothing different in his body. Then, he slowly opened his eyes. And, a thoughtful look flashed through them. 2 months later, Shi Mu and the other 4 people finally arrived at the end of the widely spread Black Rock Mountains. These people had encountered several vicious beast attacks during their journey. But, they hadn't come across any beast as vicious as that 4-eyed tiger. Moreover, there had been nothing that Jin Xiaochai and Shi Mu hadn't been able to deal with. There was a hilly zone with hills of different heights near the mouth of the valley. But, its view was blocked, and couldn't be seen clearly. Finally, we're here. Shi Tiu, for how long do we have to walk in this wasteland? Let's go out. I want to take a bath. I feel dirty from inside. Jin Xiaochai had trotted to the mouth of the valley. She stretched her body, turned around as she spoke. Cai is also going to freshen up. I'm really dirty too. Cai sat on Jin Xiaohai's shoulder. It flapped its wings, and shouted. We would have to move in the southwest direction for a month, and pass through the marshland along the journey. Then, we would go out of the wasteland. Shi Mu walked to a side and said. He didn't know where to begin. He got confused between Cai and Jin Xiaochai. Jin Xiaochai had also begun to call him Shi Tiu like Cai used to. But, Shi Mu was glad as his ears could stay away from the continuous noise. After all, this parrot was extremely noisy. Moning and Bai Shuixiu followed behind Shi Mu. They had fought side by side with Shi Mu during this period of time. So, both of them had become a little close to him. What is this? Jin Xiaochai was about to move away from the mouth of the valley. Suddenly, she stopped walking and said. Shi awaits your excellency in the Black Demon sect. Black Demon sect Shi, isn't this you, Shi Tiu? Cai's voice was heard. Shi Mu's complexion changed as he heard Cai's words. He increased his pace, and moved away from the mouth of the valley. He saw a 10 feet high boulder between the 2 short hills. It was at a distance of 100 feet from him. The boulder had been placed on the ground in a tilting manner. A row of characters in a wild and sharp font could be clearly seen on its surface. There's a problem. The earth-ranked warrior Zha Gu of the fierce snake tribe must be nearby. Shi Mu's complexion changed. He then said in a heavy tone. Who? An earth-ranked warrior. Jin Xiaochai was startled. Moning and Bai Shuixiu rushed from behind as they heard this. Their complexions had changed as well. It's an emergency. There's no time for an explanation. Zha Gu is looking for me. So, he mustn't create trouble for you. Sister Jin, you should run away along with Moning and the others. We should move separately. An idea crossed Shi Mu's mind. He calmed down and said. Master Jin, it won't make a difference if we die. But, the mission of the sect makes a difference. We can't compete with this earth-level expert. Emoning and Bai Shuixiu looked at each other. Then, they took a few steps forward towards Jin Xiaochai and said, Emoning, you run away with Bai Shuixiu. Brother Shi and I can compete with Zhagu together. I Jin Xiaochai am not afraid of anyone, no matter how strong he is. Jin Xiaochai shot a glance at that boulder as she said. Sister Jin, Emoning is right. We should give importance to the mission that the sect has assigned to us. Moreover, that matter, please Sister Jin. Shi Mu looked towards Jin Xiaochai with tranquil expressions on his face. He then cupped his hands, and said, All right, I understand. Take care of yourself. Hope to see you soon. Jin Xiaochai became silent for a moment. Then, she nodded in serious manner, and turned around towards Emoning and Bai Shuixiu. After that, she started to walk towards the other side of the mountain. Emoning and Bai Shuixiu cupped their hands towards Shi Mu as a greeting before they left. Emoning's expressions were complex. It seemed that he was eager to leave from there. Bai Shuixiu spoke up in a low voice, Take care. The parrot cai flew in the air. It looked towards Jin Xiaochai and the other two people as they walked away. Then, it looked towards Shi Mu. It finally stopped flying, and sat on Shi Mu's shoulder. Cai, aren't you afraid? Shi Mu said. We the parrot clan are very brave. We can't abandon our battle companions and run away before the battle. The parrot stuck out its chest. It then said in a stern manner. Shi Mu didn't say anything. But, Cai is useless for you. It's better that we go our separate ways. Shi Tou, Cai can think of ways to take revenge if something happens to you. The parrot changed the topic of discussion and said. It shook one of its wings as it spoke. It then flew away. Shi Mu lifted his left hand, and shot his forefinger. Regiments of white chi masses flashed on his fingernail. Soon, they transformed into white thin chains, and caught the parrot. Master, what are you doing? The parrot lost its head in fear, and shouted. Cai, fly a bit higher. See if there's any danger. Figure out the situation, and tell me without any delay, Shi Mu said with a smile. The parrot seemed to be unwilling at first. But, it then agreed. After that, the white chains around its body loosened up. It flapped its wings, and flew higher. Shi Mu closed his eyes. He opened them after a short while. He then rushed in the opposite direction of where Jin Xiaochai and the others had gone. His speed was so fast that it seemed as if he was flying. He moved along the mountain hill in a zigzag manner for a long while. Suddenly, he seemed to have been distracted by something, and his footsteps came to a stop. The characters on the piece of the boulder appeared in front of him once again. His complexion changed. He clenched his teeth, and changed his direction. He then started to rush once again. He changed his direction several times as he ran. But, that piece of boulder continued to follow him like a shadow follows a body even though Cai's vision would show Shi Mu nothing in the direction he'd chose. Shi Mu stopped walking, and stood on a leveled ground between the small hills. His complexion had sunk. He looked at the piece of the boulder. Then, he took out the short stick and the black blade from his back. He united them together. They formed into an extended blade with a long hilt. Suddenly, an ice-cold aura of killing was felt from behind his body. Shi Mu felt afraid in his heart. He turned around, and saw a middle-aged barbarian with a vertical and twisted long braid. This man was standing around 100 feet away from him. He had scars around his green, cold, and gloomy eyes. His eyes looked like the eyes of a snake. Shi Mu felt as if he was being stared at by this man. And, this left him to feel a slight chill in his heart. This man gave him a sense of oppression. It was little modest than the great elder of the Black Demon sect. But, the earth rank power existed inside him. Your Excellency, who are you? What are you doing here? Shi Mu asked with an expressionless face. Didn't you ask me to find you? So, I've come, the middle-aged barbarian replied. Then, he waved his hand, and a long green whip appeared in it. So, Your Excellency is Zhagu. I've known your name for a long time, Shi Mu said. He gripped his extended blade in his hands. He then made a position by raising his hands. Hee. Interesting. Listen. I'll do you a favor and I will use this boulder to make a gravestone for you if you'll be able to escape 3 moves of mine, Zhagu laughed and said. The ground on the side of his foot was split open as he spoke. Then, 17 or 18 thick green cane vines came out while breaking the ground. They then got wrapped around Zhagu's body. After that, several other cane vines came out breaking the ground, and rushed towards Shi Mu. Shi Mu jumped up. He then shot himself towards Zhagu. The meteoric blade in his hand released red rays of light. One could hardly look straight at them. Billowing clouds! He shouted. Then, his extended blade transformed into a red light. And, it went towards Zhagu in order to behead him. A half-moon-shaped blade light emerged. It carried heat waves along with it. It then severed the cane vines that surrounded Zhagu's body. Bang! A loud sound echoed. The blade light exploded, and split open. It then transformed into segments of fire cloud. After that, it trapped Zhagu. Shi Mu didn't reveal a happy expression on his face. Instead, he hit his feet on the ground, and shot himself backwards. He then mumbled something, and pointed his finger towards a place in front of him. Bang! Zhagu's body released a green light. And, the fire clouds rolling around his body were dispersed as this happened. After that, he grasped the long green whip in his hand, and put it in front of him horizontally in order to defend himself. The cane vines tied around Zhagu's body had already broken apart, and fallen on the ground. The green whip formed a green light shield around his body. The half-moon-shaped blade light couldn't do the slightest damage to the shield of green light. It couldn't even touch his clothes. But then, a black chi flashed behind his body. And, the silhouette of a skeleton appeared out of it. This skeleton had a green flower on its head, and a bone spear in its hand. It was none other than Yan Luo. Soul flames of deep blue color flashed in Yan Luo's eye sockets. Waves of black light appeared from the spear in its hand. The light then transformed into a black flowing light. Suddenly, it went piercing towards Zhagu's back. Zhagu was amazed and terrified at the same time. He tilted his body in order to dodge the attack. A green light flashed from the whip in his hand at the same time. The tip of the whip stretched out, and went thrashing towards the head of the bone spear. But, who would have imagined that the bone spear would change its direction a flash? It dodged the attack of the whip. Then, a black light flashed, and went piercing towards Zhagu's left leg. The light rays tried to protect Zhagu's body from the bone spear. But, it seemed to be useless. Zhagu issued a roar. Then, a green light was released from his body. After that, the light got condensed into the loft-sized virtual shadow of a green snake. The spiritual energy violently undulated in the surroundings as soon as the virtual shadow appeared. Some waves of ripples also appeared in the air. Martial arts phasing technique. Shi Mu felt afraid in his heart. This virtual shadow of the green snake was the symbol of an earth-ranked warrior. Martial arts phasing was performed by condensing and conjoining the real chi, the thoughts, and the martial techniques. You dared to injure me. I won't forgive you, Zhagu's bitter voice resounded amid the martial arts phasing. A hole had appeared on Zhagu's left leg. And, blood was gushing out of his wound. The tail of the virtual shadow of the huge green snake was moving to and fro. The snake tail was as thick as a millstone. And, it went charging towards Yan Luo at a lightning-fast speed. A ray of light flashed on Yan Luo's body. And, its figure suddenly disappeared. Bang! The snake tail bombarded on the ground. A several feet deep pit was formed where it had hit the ground. Well! Zhagu issued a sound of surprise. He couldn't see Yan Luo's movements clearly even with his cultivation of the earth rank realm. In fact, it had seemed that Yan Luo had disappeared into nothingness. Zhagu became angry at this. However, Shi Mu had taken advantage of the time the skeleton had engaged Zhagu. And, he fled towards a distant place with a lightning speed. He was extraordinarily fast, so much so that he had covered a distance of 100 feet in the blink of an eye. Zhagu had been left enraged by this. The green light flashed on his body once again. The martial arts phasing dispersed, and disappeared into thin air. His complexion became a little pale. But, he immediately resumed it to normal. The martial arts phasing technique had consumed up a great amount of his real qi. He couldn't fully use both the skills together while making an attack even with his current cultivation. Zhagu moved his body. He wanted to chase after Shi Mu. But, he stumbled. Then, a gloomy and cold feeling rose from the wound in his left leg. The wound had paralyzed him. Moreover, his power had converged, and spread in the surroundings. He felt surprised. He also felt a little dizziness. Some kind of a strange energy seemed to be entering into his wound. This energy finally touched his mind. Chapter 218, In Pursuit. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Shi Mu plunged from the slope, and disappeared without a trace. Boy, where will you go? Zhagu bellowed loudly. Then, a green light began to flow on the surface of the green whip he held in his hand. After that, a few green magic characters flickered on its surface. He flicked his wrist, and the long whip elongated to 10 times of its original length. It galloped towards a huge 20 feet high boulder in the vicinity. Woo! The boulder was sent flying in the air as it was struck by the whip. It had been shot towards Shi Mu. It dashed towards him at an incredibly fast speed. It carried a terrifying and imposing aura along with it. In fact, it seemed as if he had infused it with a lot of real qi. Shi Mu seemed to have felt something. Consequently, he turned around, and saw the approaching boulder. He then quickly bent his legs. The muscles protruded out of his arms as he wielded his 8 feet long extended blade, and hacked at the bottom of the boulder. The upper part of his body bent backwards at the same time. A loud sound was heard. Shi Mu had hit the bottom of the boulder in such a way that it was deflected upwards in the air. Consequently, it flew past him while brushing his bent body. Shi Mu stood up straight once the boulder had passed him. His complexion looked pale. This attack had stirred up the insides of his body. Fortunately, he hadn't received any injuries. He shot a glance at Zhagu who was still far from him. Then, his stature flashed, and he crossed over the steep slope in an instant. A trace of haze flashed through Zhagu's eyes as he noticed that Shi Mu had disappeared from his line of sight. Then, he turned his head, and looked at the wound on his left leg. He saw the faint trace of a black smoke curling up around his wound. That smoke also exhibited the tendency of spreading in the surrounding area of his leg. Suddenly, a hilted knife appeared in Zhagu's hand. He clenched his teeth as the sharp knife pricked his wound. Then, his hand began to move the knife. Fresh blood splashed out as he scooped out the rotten flesh that had been infected by the black smoke, and removed it from the area surrounding his wound. Zhagu issued a stuffy groan. But, he looked somewhat relieved now. The sense of numbness vanished from his wound once the infected flesh had been scooped out. However, his mind was still gripped with the feeling of dizziness since it hadn't been dispelled in its entirety. He shook his head. Then, he waved his hand, and took out a paper charm. He stuck it on his wound. The blood stopped flowing. After that, he stood up, and dashed in the direction where Shi Mu had fled. He had allowed Shi Mu to flee far away from him since he wasn't the least bit anxious about the prospect of Shi Mu's successful escape. This confidence had obviously sourced from his own cultivation. He's in pursuit. Shi Mu could clearly see Zhagu's movement through the vision of his parrot, which was flying approximately 500 meters above his head. Therefore, he murmured. Yan Luo was also following closely beside him. It seemed to have heard Shi Mu's words, since the black smoke had already begun to emanate from its body. Then, its stature flashed, and disappeared from its place. Shi Mu stopped running as he saw this. Then, he swept his gaze all around. But, Yan Luo's silhouette was nowhere to be seen. He then tried to contact Yan Luo through his mind. But, Yan Luo didn't respond to his call either. In this meantime, he got a closer look at Zhagu as he had stopped running. Therefore, he stamped his feet in a fierce manner, and started to run once again. A ray of green light flashed on his body as he stuck a body-lifting charm. Consequently, his momentum increased substantially once again. Zhagu was hundreds of feet behind him. But, he concentrated his full attention on Shi Mu's aura, and continued to chase after him at a moderate pace. His speed was far more than Shi Mu's owing to his earth-ranked cultivation. Therefore, the distance between them was rapidly decreasing. And, Shi Mu's figure soon appeared in his field of vision. A ferocious look flashed through Zhagu's eyes as he raised his arm. But, a mass of black smoke flashed behind him. Then, Yan Luo's silhouette appeared behind him. A cold light flashed as it flicked its bone spear. After that, the light transformed into numerous densely packed white spears, and rushed towards Zhagu's back. A whiff of cold and gloomy air swept over Zhagu at the same time. Zhagu felt a slight chill in his heart. He had been severely injured by Yan Luo a short while back. Therefore, he couldn't continue to attack Shi Mu in the face of this strike. He quickly jumped to a side. He flicked his arm at the same time, and his long green whip turned into a green whip shadow. His whip was now prepared to receive that formation of the white spears. The whip shadow was about to collide with the spear formation. But then, the white spear formation dispersed, and turned back into the bone spear. It was then pulled back with a lightning speed in order to evade the collision with the green whip shadow. The black smoke on Yan Luo's body flashed, and its stature became fuzzy. It then disappeared from sight without a trace. Zhagu's complexion sank. Yan Luo's silhouette had disappeared from his line of sight. But, he could still faintly feel a wisp of killing intention through his spirit sensing ability. Moreover, it seemed to be wandering around in a continuous manner while keeping an acceptable distance from him. It was obvious that the skeleton hadn't left the place. The fact was that it would hide in the vicinity every time it disappeared. But still, it couldn't be detected. Damn! Zhagu was enraged. He could sense that the cultivation of this skeleton wasn't very profound and formidable. It seemed to be at the advanced stage of the Xian-Tian realm at best. However, its speed was inexplicably fast. Moreover, its attacking techniques were extremely strange. All these features were sufficient to make Zhagu extremely cautious. Wait a minute, a human skeleton. Can it be? Suddenly, the thought about a possibility crossed Zhagu's mind. The trace of an ominous glint flashed through his eyes. After that, a bright red luminescence flashed on his back. Then, a 20 or 30 feet long red-colored fiery snake shadow emerged behind his back. After that, a pair of fiery red wings sprouted on the snake's back. But, the snake didn't have any scales on its body. The fiery snake's virtual shadow transformed into a mass of raging flames, and started to soar into the sky. After that, it underwent a change once again, and transformed into a pair of 10 feet long fiery red wings. The fiery red wings flapped a few times. Then, Zhagu began to fly. Zhagu then swooped down towards Shi Mu like a gigantic red hawk. Zhagu had barely started to fly when the mass of black smoke flashed beside his body. Then, a long and white bone spear was thrust towards him from the black smoke. You've courted death. Zhagu had already anticipated this attack. Therefore, a layer of green light flashed on his body. Then, 3 thick green arrow-like shadows darted out, and bumped into the white bone spear. The long whip sprang out at the same time like a spirit snake. It then swept towards Yan Luo's head. The soul flames in Yan Luo's eye sockets didn't even flicker while confronting this kind of a challenge. In fact, Yan Luo simply shook the bone spear in its arm in a casual manner. The bone spear became fuzzy, and transformed into 3 long spear shadows. Then, these shadows smashed against the 3 green arrow-like shadows in a precise manner. Bang! 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 The 3 arrow-like shadows were rooted and broken into pieces. The bone spear emerged in Yan Luo's hand once again. Then, Yan Luo wielded its hand like lightning. A half-moon-shaped spear light appeared high in the sky. It then hacked at the green whip in a fierce manner. This string of actions came to an end within the time frame of an electric spark. A loud metal clanging sound rang out in the air. Yan Luo shot backwards by taking advantage of the counter-shaking force. And, the black smoke began to curl around its body as it went backwards. Then, it vanished into thin air once again. Zhao Gu's complexion turned pale. But, he still looked calm and composed. Moreover, the trace of a dignified look could be seen in his eyes. Yan Luo's strength had far exceeded his expectations. In fact, Zhao Gu might have suffered severe injuries if it weren't for his formidable strength that was far beyond his enemies. That pair of fiery red wings on his back had begun to surge in a rapid manner as he continued to dash towards Shi Mu. He had barely flown for a moment when the mass of black smoke emerged beside his body once again. It was followed by the appearance of Yan Luo's silhouette. It then thrust its bone spear towards him once again. Humph! Zhao Gu pointed his foot, and his body shifted to a side. He didn't pay any attention to Yan Luo's attack, and continued to fly forward. The green whip in his hand transformed into a group of fuzzy whip shadows at the same time, and shrouded him from all directions. It looked like a mass of green light from afar. The soul flames flickered in Yan Luo's eye sockets. Its bone spear bumped into the green whip shadows. Then, Yan Luo pulled its spear back. Zhao Gu took advantage of the whip shadows to protect his body. Yan Luo's sneak attack had made the enemy refrain from acting recklessly. But, its attack clearly wasn't as smooth as the previous one. Zhao Gu's speed was reduced by a great margin. But, the distance between him and Shi Mu was also reducing at an extremely fast speed. Cai was hovering at a high altitude. It was hundreds of feet above the ground. It could clearly see the situation below. So, it was a little anxious. However, it didn't dare to fly any lower. Shi Mu also had a panoramic view of the situation behind him through the parrot's vision. Zhao Gu was barely 300 feet away from him now. Shi Tiu, that skeleton doesn't seem to be in a good situation, Cai's voice resounded in Shi Mu's mind. I know. Shi Mu bore a calm expression on his face. However, the trace of an anxious look could be seen under the mask of his calmness. The brightness of Yan Luo's soul flames seemed to have faded to a great extent. It had been trying to keep up with an enemy who had an earth-rank cultivation. And, this seemed to have consumed an enormous amount of its spirit power. Shi Mu's eyes flickered as he established a communication with Yan Lan through his mind. He then issued an order to it. Yan Luo's soul flames fluctuated for a moment, it seemed as if it was hesitating. Then, it stopped attacking Zhao Gu, and jumped backwards. The black smoke flashed, and gradually vanished. Zhao Gu was startled. But then, he was overwhelmed with joy. The dreadful killing aura that had been lingering around his body had finally disappeared. He started to flutter the fiery red wings behind his back without any disturbance. And, his speed increased as a result of this. It only took him a few breaths to catch up with Shi Mu. In fact, he was only 100 feet away from Shi Mu now. Suddenly, Shi Mu turned his head, and waved his hand. 2 red magic characters fled from his hand, and transformed into 2 fiery spears, each of them was 10 feet long. The raging flames on the fiery spears were surging up in a violent manner. They issued bursts of crackling and rumbling sounds as they dashed towards Zhao Gu. It's just a trivial technique. Gu grunted. He then wielded his arm, and the green whip transformed into two whip shadows. After that, the whip shadows thrashed the two long and fiery spears. Boom! Boom! The two fiery spears shattered into small pieces, and blotted the sky with fire rain. Human boy, I didn't expect that you'd be a Dark Moon disciple. You were able to summon a Xian ranked human skeleton for the battle. It seems that you have a very high status. Well, I'll exterminate your spirit today. Then, you'll never be reincarnated. Gu roared loudly as he waved his arm. Then, the green whip started to exude bright rays of light. Moreover, numerous green magic characters emerged amid the green light. Then, the body of the whip began to swell, and became as thick as a bowl. A long barbed tip emerged on top of it. It then pounced towards Shi Mu in a fierce manner as if a sinister python was flinging its tail. It darted towards him at an astonishing speed. The huge wind pressure had hit Shi Mu's face even before the whip had arrived. And, Shi Mu started to have a problem in breathing owing to its oppressive force. The words that Gu had just spoken had left him a little bewildered. But, he cast this thought aside. He then issued a low shout, and a ray of light dazzled on his chest. After that, the virtual shadow of the three-headed fierce python appeared behind his back. It looked vivid and lifelike. It integrated into his body at an extremely fast speed. Then, numerous black scales started to sprout on the surface of his body. They quickly covered his entire body. This was the first time that Shi Mu had transformed into the beast mode after he had stepped into the Xian realm. The spirit power of the three-headed python began to float around his body. In addition, his own Xian real qi got fused with the python's spirit power. The aura around Shi Mu's body surged up, and reached the Xian middle stage at one fell swoop. Then, it continued to surge higher. The extended blade in his hand flared up as he issued a loud shout. He then raised his hand, and a 10 feet long blade light hacked at the thick whip shadow. It carried a huge blazing red flame along with it. A loud rumbling sound was heard. A mass of red and green light exploded in the air, and the raging flames soared to the sky. An invisible airwave entrained with an enormous force also surged up. Shi Mu's body shook, and was sent flying by its impact like a meteorite. He got knocked against a mountain wall that was almost 100 feet away. The mountain wall collapsed with a loud rumble. And, a large piece of broken rock buried Shi Mu beneath it. Chapter 219, Seeking Survival in Danger. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Shi Mu was jolted, and sent flying by the forceful impact of the green whip. He was thrown backwards in an inverted position. But, a wisp of strange energy passed through the whip at the same time, and spread inside Gu's body. This made his body suffer a severe jolt. It's indeed the three-headed ominous python. This boy has plenty of secrets. Gu steadied his body. Then, he snorted coldly, and continued to dash forward in an attempt to pounce towards that pile of broken stones. But then, the black light flashed beside his body. It was followed by the appearance of Yan Luo's silhouette. The soul flames in its eye sockets revealed a violent fluctuation. Yan Luo was apparently in an extremely infuriated state. The black smoke began to flare up on the surface of its bone spear. But, the black smoke seemed to be several times stronger and more intense than before. Then, the spear turned fuzzy, and transformed into a stream of black light. It had been shot forward towards Gu in order to stab him in his chest. Gu was taken aback. But, he wasn't excessively alarmed. He and Yan Luo had engaged in a hand-to-hand fight several times during this short period of time. Therefore, he had figured out Yan Luo's peculiar attacking styles and characteristics. Moreover, he had been paying attention to the surrounding sounds and movements in a constant manner. So, his stature flashed to a side as soon as the spear was thrust towards him. But Yan Luo opened its mouth, and issued a soundless scream. Its scream penetrated Gu's mind like an invisible knife. Xiaogu felt that his mind had received a severe jolt. His mind quivered, and the expression in his eyes became hazy. Even his stature that was in the process of evading the spear slowed down a little. However, the soul flames in Yan Luo's eye sockets had turned far feebler after this attack. But, Yan Luo took advantage of this short gap. It thrust its bone spear deeply into Xiaogu's left arm. A huge mass of black smoke tumbled through its spear, and spread in his left arm. Half of Xiaogu's arm was smeared with black color as a result. Xiaogu felt that a sense of numbness was being transmitted from his left arm. The blue veins began to throb in the corner of his eyes. He then thundered in a violent manner, and his entire body started to gleam with a layer of magnificent green light. Then, a massive image of a green snake got condensed behind his back. Then, the snake's tail moved, and swept towards Yan Luo while carrying a dreadful and imposing aura along with it. Yan Luo pulled back its bone spear. Then, its stature flashed. It vanished into thin air before the snake's tail could touch its body. However, Yan Luo's action was relatively slower than before. Therefore, it couldn't escape the attack completely. A kaka sound was transmitted from its left arm, and it seemed as if it had been cracked by the attack. Xiaogu's complexion turned deathly white. The wound of his left arm was extremely deep. Moreover, the wisp of strange energy that had invaded his body seemed much more profound than the previous times. In fact, it had made his entire arm numb. The wisp of cold and gloomy energy around his wound also seemed to be severely puncturing his spirit in a violent manner like an invisible arrow. The fact was that Xiaogu's spirit had been receiving severe damages in a continuous manner. His spirit had reached an exhausted state as a result. And, he soon began to feel that a few golden stars were flickering before his eyes. Xiaogu began to gasp for breath. He then waved his hand, and took out a shining white pill. He swallowed it down. Then, his complexion improved a little. He glanced at his left arm, as if he wanted to treat it. Bang! But then, a loud rumble was heard not far from the pile of crushed stones near the mountain wall. After that, numerous crushed stones and rocks were sent flying in the air as Shi Mu's silhouette sprang out from inside the pile. An ominous glint flashed across Xiaogu's eyes as he saw Shi Mu. He dropped the thought of treating the wound on his left arm, and raised his right hand. That image of the green snake behind his back started to condense to an even denser state than before. Moreover, the scales became clearly visible on the snake's tail. The green snake opened its big mouth, and spurted a thick blue-colored light beam. The light beam flashed, and turned into numerous densely packed black threads. Then, the threads swept towards Shi Mu in order to cover him. Shi Mu's complexion changed. These black threads were advancing towards him at an incredible speed. Therefore, it was too late to dodge them. Suddenly, an idea flashed through Shi Mu's mind like an electric current. He emanated his real qi and the power of the totem on his body at the same time. A black and a red-colored radiance burst forth on the surface of his body. After that, 2 layers of protective shields got condensed around his body in a flash. In the meantime, he fished out a yellow magic charm, and pinched it between his fingers. It was the same golden star charm that he had drawn on the 3-headed python's skin. A layer of golden luminescence emerged on the surface of his body with a flash of golden light. The radiance looked as if he was wearing a golden armor. He then crushed the golden star charm into pieces. He mumbled something, and a streak of white light darted out from his hand. It got condensed into a shell-like pale white protective shield in the outermost part of the 2 shields. After that, innumerable white magic characters began to flow on the surface of the shield. The shield began to sparkle miraculously. It looked exceptionally firm. Shi Mu had been practicing the moon-swallowing art during the last few months. Therefore, he had attained the 7th layer of the art of accumulating spirit power. This protective shield was a new magic technique that he had recently comprehended. It was called the Qi Spirit Shield. Shi Mu could now congeal a strong shield by using his magic power. Shi Mu had barely finished these preparations when the black threads arrived close to him with a whistling sound. Boom! A loud explosive sound was heard as a large mass of green-colored lights ruptured. The light then transformed into a billowing green airwave, and engulfed Shi Mu's body. Shi Mu had deployed several layers of protective shields: the Qi Spirit Shield, the 2 layers of protective light shields, and the firm armor of the Golden Star Charm. However, all of them were shattered into smithereens by the impact of black threads. In fact, it had seemed as if they had been made out of sheets of paper. Shi Mu's body was jolted, and he was sent flying by an unparalleled massive force. He spouted out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, most of the impact of the black threads had been counterbalanced by the several layers of defenses. Therefore, the snake scales on his chest hadn't been thoroughly disrupted. But, his internal organs had felt a severe jolt, so much so that they almost seemed to be on the verge of rupturing. But, Shi Mu's body had already undergone through the stern tempering process while passing through the 5 layers of the art of breeding the strong evil ape. Otherwise, his internal organs would have certainly ruptured. In fact, he would have died by this time. Shi Mu crashed to the ground with a huge force. The cloth on his upper body had been completely destroyed. Most of the scales on his chest looked crushed and mutilated. In fact, not even an inch of his body was left fully intact. He looked badly mutilated. Zhagu was stunned. It seemed that he hadn't expected that Shi Mu could withstand the attack of his totem magic. Shi Mu appeared to be in a miserable condition. But, he had been inflicted with only a few skin injuries. He hadn't received any fatal injury. An ominous glint flashed across Zhagu's eyes. He raised his arm, and his green whip was extended. It shot forward like an arrow leaving its bowstring, and thrust towards Shi Mu's head. Zhagu finally unfolded the overwhelming force of his earth-ranked existence. The long green whip approached Shi Mu's body in an instant. It didn't even give him time to react. Shi Mu was struggling to crawl up. The only thing he could feel was a sharp and cold wind hitting him. Even his pupils shrunk. But he wasn't able to dodge the attack because his bones and muscles felt extremely soft and powerless. Suddenly, a shadow flashed beside him. It was none other than Yan Luo. It held his body, and pushed him aside. Shi Mu felt that his body had become extremely light. He found himself flying 78 feet away from his original place as if he was riding a cloud. Kaka! Yan Luo had pushed Shi Mu away in order to protect him. But, its own left arm had got pierced by the green whip. Its left arm was already fractured. So, it was crushed once it was hit by the whip. Zhagu raised his arm once again, and his green whip exuded a dazzling green light. It then rolled out towards Yan Luo like a snake since the skeleton was standing within his reach. Yan Luo flicked the bone spear with its right hand, and it transformed into a magnificent spear formation. It then struck the whip in a precise manner. Yan Luo was now left with just one hand to use its spear. Therefore, it could only use a limited amount of its power. But, the whip changed its trajectory amidst all the chaos of metal clanging sounds. It pounded on Yan Luo's body, and sent it flying backwards. The soul flames flashed in Yan Luo's eye sockets as it received its bone spear. Then, its body emanated a bright black light. Suddenly, Yan Luo appeared beside Shi Mu while trailing a string of remnant shadows through the way. It then pulled Shi Mu with its right arm. The black smoke began to seep out of Yan Luo's body. It then enveloped both of them. Their statures flashed, and the two of them disappeared without any trace. Zhagu's stature flashed, and arrived at the place from where the two of them had disappeared. His complexion turned gloomy. His body swayed a bit, and he issued a muffled snort. The black smoke on his left arm had spread to his shoulder. Now, his entire arm had turned into jet black in color. A blue vein began to throb on Zhagu's forehead. He sucked in a deep breath, and flicked his right hand. Blood-red nails appeared on his fingers. Each of them was as long as 7 or 8 fingers when they'd be lined one after another. Puff! Puff! Zhagu's fingers moved in a swift manner. He then placed his nails near the wound on his left shoulder. His nails emitted intermittent bursts of blood-red light. It looked as if the red light was absorbing the black smoke from his arm. The blood-red nails turned black in color after a few breaths' time. The black smoke on Zhagu's left arm had soon dissipated by a significant margin. And, his arm had nearly resumed its normal color. He finally felt relieved. He then turned his hand, and took out 2 pills. Both of them were different in color. After that, he opened his mouth, and swallowed the pills. His complexion soon changed, and became a lot better. After that, he glanced around in a keen and cautious manner. Suddenly, a layer of yellow luminescence emerged on his face, especially his nose and tongue had become yellow in color. He then began to sniff in the air. Zhagu's stature finally moved after some time, and he rushed in a particular direction. The air undulated in a small depression near a hill. After that, 2 silhouettes emerged inside that depression. They were Yan Luo and Shi Mu. Shi Mu swept his gaze all around. His face revealed a hint of shock. Yan Luo had gobbled up a number of beast souls when they were in the Black Rock Mountains. It had also devoured several low-level beast souls along with the beast soul of the 4-eyed gigantic tiger that was a Xiantian consummate stage beast. Therefore, its cultivation had soared to the sky. Now, Yan Luo's strength could be placed on par with a Xiantian advanced stage warrior. This was the reason that it had been able to resist Zhagu. But, Shi Mu hadn't expected that Yan Luo possessed the ability to teleport. Therefore, he felt both surprised and pleased at the same time. Yan Luo put Shi Mu down on the ground. After that, it extended its right arm, and pulled the beast soul bag from his waist. Then, it opened its mouth, and issued a suction force. A string of light balls flew out from the beast soul bag, and submerged into its mouth. Shi Mu was startled. But, he didn't stop it. In fact, he had gathered these beast souls for Yan Luo only. Shi Mu's and Yan Luo's minds were connected to each other. Therefore, he could feel Yan Luo's feelings. Yan Luo seemed to be burning with fury. Yan Luo's soul flames had become dim during the fight. But, it became exuberant after absorbing the beast souls. It still couldn't reach its best condition. But, it had regained almost 70 to 80% of its strength. Yan Luo raised its head, and looked towards the sky. Then, it slowly stood up. Its entire body faintly emanated an invisible force of a Xiantian advanced stage powerhouse. Shi Mu felt strange as he gazed at the spirit pet that stood in front of him. Yan Luo had an extremely slow reaction time a little while ago. In fact, it was no better than a martial disciple who was at the 7th or 8th level of the body tempering technique. But, who would have thought that the same skeleton would be able to withstand the strength of an earth-ranked powerhouse someday? Young Master Ju's eyes would have gone wide open in shock if he were to find out about this. Shi Tiu, hurry up and run. That person is in pursuit of you again, Cai's voice resounded in his mind. Shi Mu's complexion changed as an image emerged in his mind. Zhagu was flying towards the small valley at a horrifying speed. It looked that he might cover this distance in a fraction of seconds. Yan Luo's soul flames flickered. It seemed to have heard the conversation between Cai and Shi Mu. This person has destroyed my left arm. I want to personally kill him, Yan Luo's thought emerged in Shi Mu's mind. Shi Mu looked at Yan Luo with astonishment. Are you sure? Shi Mu asked. You fight for some time, Yan Luo said. Then, the black smoke flashed, and its silhouette disappeared from the sight. Shi Mu was left dumbfounded for a moment. He couldn't clearly understand the meaning behind Yan Luo's words. Moreover, he could also feel an intense killing intention that was approaching him from behind. He had also regained his shattered strength since he had taken some rest. However, he couldn't waste his time in idle thinking at this time. His stature flashed, and he fled away into the distance. However, a green beam of light was shot towards him from behind like a bolt of lightning before he could cover much distance. It dashed towards him while issuing a shrill ear-piercing sound as if it was piercing the sky. Chapter 220, A Deadly Strike. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Shi Mu was startled. His stature flashed, and shifted to a side. Bang! The place where he stood a moment ago had been struck. A huge pit had blown up in the ground. Several crumbs of stones fluttered in the air by its impact. Then, the green-colored shadow of a man flashed over Shi Mu's head, and landed in front of him. Several spiders' web-like cracks appeared on the ground as the shadow landed. Layers of dust flew in the air at the same time. Shi Mu stopped, his complexion had changed. Zhagu's silhouette appeared as the dust settled down. However, Zhagu's appearance had changed. Green-colored snake scales had emerged over his body. And, each of them was as big as a human palm. Moreover, intermittent bursts of green luminescence could be seen shrouding his entire body. It seemed as if he was clad in a suit of green armor. The green snake scales were sparkling under the sunlight. They were emitting bursts of dazzling rays of light. It seemed as if they were extremely formidable. Zhagu had apparently resorted to the beast transformation mode in order to transform his body. The aura around his body had sharply escalated, so much so that its oppressive pressure felt like a mighty tide. Moreover, green rays of light were flowing on the surface of the green whip that he held in his hand. A few magic characters were also curling around its surface as if a snake was swaying nimbly from side to side. Shi Mu's pupil shrank. He subconsciously clenched the extended black blade in his hand firmly. Zhagu's eyes looked as if they were smeared with a cold and gloomy look like ice. He swept his cold eyes around a few times. Then, his gaze stopped at Shi Mu. I admit that I underestimated you. Anyways, the warm-up time is over now. Zhagu's lips cracked into a fiendish grin. He then took a few large strides, and walked towards Shi Mu. The long green whip in his hand was emitting an even brighter radiance than before. He hadn't intended to display his dark green sea snake form in earth-ranked beast transformation to deal with a Xian Tian warrior of the base level. After all, it required an enormous consumption of spirit power to maintain this state. But, he eventually ended up relying on the power of the green scales in order to protect his body. He had done this because it wouldn't be easy to hurt Shi Mu if Yan Luo would try to mount a sneak attack on him once again. Shi Mu's hand flashed, and gently patted his own body at a lightning-fast speed. A golden light flashed, and his entire body was enveloped in a layer of golden light. After that, his hands extended, and divided the extended black blade into two parts, a blade and a short stick. Boy, be prepared to die! Zhagu thundered loudly. The green whip in his hand started to exude even brighter rays of light. Then, the whip's body began to swell up in a crazy manner. It soon became as thick as a bucket. It was then shot out toward Shi Mu. A several feet long whip shadow appeared. It then transformed into a group of fuzzy green clouds with a howling wind-like sound. It blotted out the sky as it stormed towards Shi Mu in order to trap him inside it. Shi Mu knew that this attack was impossible to evade. However, his face didn't reveal a petrified look. Instead, his black blade and short stick emanated dazzling rays of light as he infused his magic power into his arms. Then, they transformed into a vast stretched red blade shadow and a mountain-like green stick shadow. The blade technique that he had displayed was the 13 series of Gale Force blade art, and the stick technique was called the Art of 7 Killer Sticks. The overlapping layers of red blade light were surging up in a violent manner like the howling wind and billowing clouds. Moreover, the imposing aura of the mountain-like 7 layers of the stick shadows seemed even more appalling than before. Both of them seemed to be prepared to receive the group of fuzzy blue clouds. Boom! A loud sound was heard. Then, the fuzzy blue clouds submerged in the vast blade light and stick shadows. Shi Mu felt that a wisp of irresistible mighty force had rushed towards him. He was alarmed. He quickly held the black blade and the short stick in front of his body in an intersecting position. He was now prepared to receive the strike. Bang! A series of loud sounds rang out in the air. The blade and the stick were shaken up by the impact of this collision. They were sent flying from Shi Mu's hands. Moreover, the tricolor lights red, black, and golden were gleaming on the surface of Shi Mu's body. They also trembled in a disorderly manner. Then, they were rooted and dispersed almost at the same time. Moreover, most of the scales on his body had shattered into pieces. Blood was gurgling out from all over his body. A few cracking sounds were heard from the bones of his entire body. His feet sank into the ground. Xiaogu was dumbfounded at first. But then, he cracked into an evil grin. His green whip rolled out like a nimble python once again. It wrapped around Shi Mu's body with a lightning speed. After that, Xiaogu raised his arm, and pulled his whip backwards. The whip rolled backwards while dragging Shi Mu's body along the way. Then, a ray of red light sparked on his left hand as a dagger appeared in it. He then pointed the tip of the dagger at Shi Mu's throat. Then, something strange happened. Go! A cold light streaked across Shi Mu's eyes. Then, a green ray of light flashed on his left hand. The ground under Xiaogu's feet cracked the next moment. After that, dozens of thick green vines broke out from the cracked ground, and wound around Xiaogu's feet. A red-colored paper charm fled from his right hand at the same time. It transformed into a fire spear with raging flames. The fiery spear dashed towards Xiaogu in a violent manner while blotting out the entire sky. Shi Mu threw out almost all the fire spear magic charms that he had carried within a fraction of a second. More than 20 middle-level fire attributes magic charms were fired towards his enemy. All of them had been drawn on animal skins. Even an earth-ranked powerhouse wouldn't dare to underestimate them. Xiaogu was alarmed and enraged at the same time. But then, he smiled contemptuously. He didn't pay attention to the vine canes that had fastened his feet firmly. Suddenly, the knife in his left hand gleamed with a magnificent silver light. Then, it transformed into a dozen or more knife shadows. They then started to strike the 20 fiery spears. The silver and the red lights intertwined with each other, and started to rupture. The explosion set off multiple hot air waves. They began to ripple all around. Suddenly, the entire area was engulfed by scorching air waves to the extent that it seemed to have completely transformed into a bright red sea of fire. A ray of black light darted out from the sea of fire. It was a fist-sized black iron ball that had arrived speedily while producing an ear-piercing sound. Xiaogu swayed the knife in his left hand. He wanted to strike this iron ball, and send it flying. A loud metal clanging sound rang out. Xiaogu's complexion changed as he felt an unfathomable force welling up through his knife. He didn't have to worry about this force owing to his strength. But, his left arm was in an injured state as it had been stabbed by Yan Luo. It hadn't retained its full strength as yet. Xiaogu struck the iron ball, and shook it away. However, an enormous force invaded his body by passing through his knife. He would have seized this opportunity, and drawn a few steps backwards if there hadn't been anything to obstruct him. But, he couldn't dodge this force as his body was tied up by the vines. His body received a burst of a severe jolt as a result. Even the whip in his right hand flashed. Then, its binding force was reduced by a great margin. Shi Mu was exhilarated. He took advantage of this opportunity, and pulled back like a fish. Then, he scuttled out of the fetter of the green whip. But, his internal injuries were badly affected, and he fell to the ground. His face contorted in agony. But, he didn't dare to stay there even for a fleeting moment. He swallowed his pain. He then turned around, and fled away into the distance. He had barely rushed for a short distance when an earth-shaking roar resounded behind him. "Boy, you're screwed!" Suddenly, the green radiance on Xiaogu's body grew even brighter than before. Then, the green vines began to explode. Xiaogu sprang forward, and chased after Shi Mu in a crazy manner. He raised the whip in his hand at the same time. Suddenly, a mass of black smoke flashed behind Zha Gu's body. It was followed by Yan Luo's silhouette that appeared out of thin air like a ghost. Its entire body was shrouded in a white flame, especially its right arm, which was covered in a layer of blazing white flame. Its arm was sparkling amid those blazing flames, and was exuding dazzling rays of light. Then, a ray of white light flashed in the void. Yan Luo's right hand had curled into a fist, and pounded towards Zha Gu's back like a bolt of lightning. Zha Gu felt that a terrifying cold and gloomy aura was about to attack him. His heart quivered with fear. He was about to move aside. But, Yan Luo opened its mouth, and a blue soul flame flew out from inside it. It then transformed into an arrow of light, and submerged into Zha Gu's head like lightning. Zha Gu's body turned stiff. The green light shield protecting his body trembled in a violent manner at first. Then, it dissipated. Yan Luo's right fist transformed into a claw. It flashed and pierced Zha Gu's heart through his back. Zha Gu's green scales melted away like snow as it bumped into the white flames that covered Yan Luo's palm. They simply couldn't resist the flames. A puff sound was heard as Yan Luo's arm penetrated deeply into his left chest, and grabbed his bright red heart. Yan Luo's soul flames flickered as its palm exerted strength and crushed his heart into pieces. Zha Gu lowered his head, and looked at the bone hand that had penetrated through his body from behind. Then, he turned his head, and looked towards Yan Luo. Yan Luo pulled its arm back. A spurt of blood gushed out from Zha Gu's mouth. He then collapsed to the ground. Even the aura around his body had weakened by now. Zha Gu was an Earth-ranked powerhouse. However, there was no possibility of his survival since his heart had been crushed. Yan Luo. Shi Mu rushed back as he saw this situation. He gazed at Yan Luo with an unbelievable look on his face. Zha Gu had been conveniently defeated by Yan Luo even though he was an Earth-ranked warrior. This incident was shocking enough to blow up Shi Mu's mind. The white flame dissipated from Yan Luo's body. But, the soul flames in its eyes swayed, and became dim. Yan Luo's body staggered at the same time, and it partly knelt on the ground. Shi Mu's complexion changed. His stature flashed, and he leapt to Yan Luo's side. Shi Mu, be careful, the frightened voice of the parrot Cai resounded in Shi Mu's mind. Let's die together. Zha Gu lay on the ground motionless. But then, he looked up, and revealed a fiendish smile. After that, his chest, back, and neck started to exude green, red, and yellow rays of light. Those three lights separated from his body, and took the form of three shadows of beast souls. One of these beast souls was a snake as big as a garret. Its entire body was covered with a layer of green scales. The second one was a 20 or 30 feet long red-colored fire snake. It had a pair of wings on its back. The third one was the smallest snake among all three. It was barely 1 foot long. It was a yellow-colored snake with no eyes. The three snake shadows flashed as they pounced towards Shi Mu. There was only a distance of 10 feet between Shi Mu and Zha Gu. Therefore, the shadows of the three beast souls arrived in front of him in a flash. Suddenly, an invisible suction force was issued by Yan Luo. The smallest yellow snake among the three beast souls trembled. Then, it was pulled back by the strength of the suction force. Yan Luo's soul flames flashed as it swallowed the smallest yellow snake's soul. However, another two beast souls advanced towards Shi Mu in order to submerge into his body. Yan Lu's soul flames turned a lot brighter and exuberant after it had swallowed a beast's soul. Suddenly, its arms flashed like a white shadow, and grabbed the top of Zha Gu's head. Ping! Zha Gu's head burst open like a watermelon. Then, a mass of green light flew out from inside it, and fled into the distance. It was Zha Gu's spirit. The green light seemed to be contaminated with a little blue flame. It was the soul flame that Yan Luo had shot earlier. Yan Luo opened its mouth, and issued a suction force once again. The group of green lights had barely covered a distance of 10 feet by this time. Suddenly, it stopped moving, and was forced to fly backwards. The mass of green light was struggling to break the shackles. It continued to take various shapes so as to get rid of the suction force. But, all its efforts went into vain. Whoosh! The green light submerged into Yan Luo's mouth along with the blue flame with a whistling sound. After that, indistinct pitiful shrieks began to spread from Yan Luo's body. However, they were soon silenced. The soul flames in Yan Luo's eyes gleamed since it had devoured 2 spirits in succession. But, Shi Mu's body looked stiff. In fact, it seemed as if he had fallen into a coma. His body then fell down like a piece of wood. Yan Luo put out its hand in order to hold Shi Mu. It hesitated for a moment. Then, it slowly placed his body on the ground. Cai also swooped down rapidly. It then received its wings, and fell beside Shi Mu as it was 10 feet away from the ground. Shi Tou, what happened to him? Cai shot a glance at Yan Luo as it said. But, Yan Luo didn't pay attention to Cai's words. It looked at Shi Mu. And the soul flames in its eyes flickered. Shi Mu felt as if a curtain of darkness had spread before his eyes. He then sank into an endless darkness, and found himself in a world of chaos. Everything was hazy and indistinct around him. The mist was fluttering everywhere in the vicinity. Shi Mu was no longer in a human form now. He had transformed into a group of white lights. A virtual shadow of a black python also stood beside him. It had 3 heads. It was the shadow of the 3-headed ominous python.